Here we are.
Here we are.
We were supposed to talk VP, but we were talking sports.
We're talking sports because
and we were in a great sense of tremendous disappointment.
We're still sad about the Tigers not making the playoffs.
Yeah, awful.
Facing the lowly Braves.
Yeah, then they don't make the playoffs, and then our beloved Lions do what they always do.
You know they're not making the playoffs.
No. 1-3 now, right?
Yeah. This talk is too straight.
Yeah. But good luck to you Cub fans and you Oriole fans and you Toronto Blue Jays fans and you Dodger fans, and Mets fans.
He's the happy one in this marriage. I'm bitter. I'm not saying good luck to anybody. I want all of you to lose.
The Nationals.
The Nationals.
Cleveland. Cleveland's in.
Yeah, all right.
Cleveland could be a team of City of Destiny.
Well, Ohio is always the city of destiny.
The LeBron endorsed.
He sure did endorse Miss Secretary Clinton.
Yes. Were you surprised or no?
I was surprised that he came out so publicly with it. You know, I mean, to have like an actual statement and to be present in front of cameras. And what's really interesting is that we know from Dan Gilbert's politics that he's either leaning towards Gary Johnson or maybe even Donald Trump because he's more of a libertarian.
And Gilbert owns the Cavaliers, and it's a big presence in Detroit.
He also owns Detroit, but that's another conversation.
It's the largest private landowner in Detroit.
So it'd be interesting to see. I mean, I'm pretty sure that they've managed to kind of work through that because President Obama relied upon LeBron James a lot during his two terms, you know, particularly when it came to pushing out the Affordable Care Act. He used LeBron James in a PSA. So I'm already sure that, you know, Mr. Gilbert has worked out, you know, whatever. Yeah,
probably big thing for Cleveland. Probably big for Cleveland voters in Cleveland for her, but it's probably not much reach outside of that. The other thing that happened, sports, and then we'll get to, I know what we're supposed to be talking about, which is the VP, is the U.S. won the Ryder Cup for the first time in a long time, which was a big victory. I love golf, so and I actually think of that moment of sport is such an interesting moment because 12-man teams, they're paired off each other. Sometimes they play with each other. And the Patrick Reed, who they now call Captain America, who's a fellow Texan, actually carried the team, interestingly enough. So good victory for...
Any time that you have like these sort of once every 2 years, once every 4 years sort of events, they build
like
up
soccer,
there, like
the Olympics.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's a build up, and then there's a whole, and then they put the team together, and then they have to work out the dynamics. And one other thing there was Tiger Woods' sort of humble presence as a vice captain on the team. It was amazing to watch him in his humility do that and not play. I thought that was kind of...
Well, you know, there's still women there. It's not like it's, you know, it's not, the river's not completely dry. I'm just saying.
It's LZ.
Anyway.
He's a monk. I thought he was a monk now. Maybe not. VP debate tonight. How much impact when it goes. These things normally don't have a tremendous amount of, zero. Though a couple of times there's been a few moments in. I was present at one of the biggest moments. I was working for Lloyd Benson in 1988, and I was in Omaha. I was actually seated between Al Gore and Dick Gephardt in the audience when Benson said, you know, I was friends with Jack Kennedy. I work with Jack Kennedy. You're no Jack Kennedy. And what happened to Quayle at that point. But he has a great moment, and Quayle ends up being vice president. So it doesn't
so it doesn't really matter. That's because, unfortunately for Benson, Dukakis was running around with the little hat on his head and the tank Trump.
If the ticket was switched, and in this instance, this race might be different if the tickets were switched.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when Kaine's name was mentioned, I will admit it was a big white guy again. You know, it was like, and not only that, like a boring white guy again, no excitement. You know, there are a lot of great names that are being floated out there. But he's grown on me, and I think he's grown on a lot of people. He's really affable. And when you begin to peel back the layers, besides kind of the old shucks and the arching eyebrow thing that he seems to do quite a bit, he really is a solid individual, both personally as well as professionally.
He reminds me of a vice principal at a high school. I mean, every time I see him and hear him talk, it's like, okay, hey, no running. How you doing? Everything going okay? I mean, he reminds me of a vice principal.
But he's like the vice principal that should be principal and is sort of biting their teeth in order to deal with the circumstances.
Everybody hates the principal.
Right, exactly.
We like you, though.
Right. Yeah. We'll keep with you. It's really interesting. My mom called once to let me know that she wouldn't be watching me today. but then also too to let me know she couldn't tell the two apart. And so tonight, because we know what is it, like 40% of Americans don't even believe that this will even make a difference.
More than that. I think there's 60% of the country has no idea who these candidates are. Yes.
Tonight's the night they get to say, this is who I am.
So I think there's two things about tonight. I think there's a present moment effect, and then there's a future moment. And the present moment is really much more for Mike Pence is Donald Trump has been bleeding.
Clean up in aisle 9.
Yeah, he's been exactly. He's been bleeding since that last debate. And can Mike Pence, it's sort of like break glass in case of emergency, right? Can he sort of stop that bleeding and give Donald Trump like a MASH unit, like put the tourniquet on, stabilize the patient, and get it to the next debate, which I think will really matter, which our beloved Martha is doing with Anderson Cooper. So I think that it's much more of a pressure. So that's the present moment. The future is these debates are also about their political future, right? Whoever is both the winner and the loser in this has a potential to have a future in the aftermath of it, but sometimes these debates are like a rehearsal, right, for any future ambition that you might have. So I think that's...
I definitely agree with you on the future aspect of it, right? Like, particularly Mike Pence, who, really needs to become VP because he's not doing very well in the numbers as far as his election bid to be governor of Indiana again. I am really curious to see how much time Kaine is going to spend reminding America why Pence isn't a good alternative either.
Do you think that's what a question I was having? How much do you think is about them, or how much of them making an argument about their principles?
Well, I believe that Pence, the majority of his time is going to be doing two things. Clean up in aisle 9 for all the things that have happened over the past week, particularly this weekend with Donald Trump, and then attack Hillary Clinton in every way possible. And Bill Clinton was grateful enough.
Ignore Kaine's record?
Well, yeah. Yeah, he's going to, he may say something about how he can be a Catholic and be pro-life or anything, or pro-choice. He may say something along those lines, but really he's got to spend a lot of time cleaning up the Trump mess and then attacking Hillary Clinton. Kaine, on the other hand, he'll spend a little time protecting, Hillary Clinton, but he actually has the luxury
You go.
Hey, America. I'm Amna Nawaz. I'm in New York. How are you?
Hey, America. We're confused.
Join us on our journey through confusion, though. Tonight is the vice presidential debate. Tim Kaine and Mike Pence are going to face off for the very first time, the only time in this election season. It's going to be pretty exciting. And
You say it like you mean it.
It was sincere, though.
I'm going to weigh in with an early prediction, which is that people, because everybody's saying that this is going to be a boring debate. It's two sitcom dads facing off against one another, blah, blah, blah. I actually think it will be exciting. Maybe not the entire time, but
I'm really curious.
Pence has to go out there and make a little noise, given the perception that his boss lost the first debate.
He's got ground to make up.
Which sitcom?
Which sitcom?
If you had to pick two dads.
My parents wouldn't let me watch television when I was a kid, so this is going to be a tough one for me. Yeah, I suffered.
Yeah,
I understand.
But I got my revenge. I'm inside the TV now.
Yeah, and they can't stop you.
Nope.
And
he's arrived.
I agree with you. I think there has a potential for some excitement. I've been calling this debate "Cleanup in Aisle 9" because of all the mess that have happened, not just in terms of the debate, but just actually after the taxes were released, the whatever that was in Pennsylvania afterwards from Donald Trump, and then today, Bill Clinton, not to be outshined, decided to say that Obamacare was like one of the greatest messes, like, in history, right? He drops that little bomb today at a campaign stop. So there's a lot of things that both candidates, both Kaine and Pence, will have to do to clean up on behalf of their respective running mates.
This is one of the interesting points, is that because a lot of Americans still don't know who they are, upwards of, I think, over 40%, right, still couldn't name either of them.
Right.
As much as they want to introduce themselves or reintroduce themselves, if that's possible tonight, to some degree they just have to kind of play it safe, right? They don't want to do any harm to their candidate.
Debating in a vice presidential debate is like playing, multi-level chess, because you need to...
You play chess.
No, so obviously I made that term up because I don't think it exists. What is it, 3D chess?
Multi-level, I like it.
Anyway, it's multi-level marketing scams that I've also never played. You have to defend your record, attack your opponent's record, and then also defend your boss's record and attack your opponent's boss's record.
Right.
So it's actually a really tough thing to do. And I think when you have these two guys who are, Kaine has called himself boring. I think they're part of the theater of tonight may be just watching them having to test their limits a little bit by being slightly more pugilistic. I also think, not for nothing, we may get some real substance tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we won't expect the same level of insults being hurled back and forth because the two men are gentlemen, and they're really liked and respected within their own parties. And in the case of Mr. Kaine, he's actually respected by the opposition as well. He comes across as a very, very likable person. I think that Kaine has an advantage in the sense that he's actually in a position in which he can take care of handling the attacks against Hillary Clinton, but then actually go to the offensive to show America why Mr. Pence is not a very good candidate either. Pence doesn't have that same sort of luxury because there's so many things he has to answer for Donald Trump. I think in terms of Kaine will be able to say, you're anti-gay, you're anti-woman, you're anti-this, you have this record in Indiana that is so bad that you're trailing right now in terms of being reelected. So not only is Mr. Trump not a good person, but neither are you. I don't think that Pence will be able to do the same thing to Kaine.
But doesn't Kaine have some liabilities? I mean, there were the issue of the gifts that he was said to have accepted while in office, I believe, as governor of Virginia before he took over, before he moved to the Senate. And also, the Republicans have already released some sort of Willie Horton-style ads. I'm not even sure if they accept that moniker, but Willie Horton-style ads about some of the ways in which he treated criminals while he was governor of Virginia, too. So I think there are avenues of potential attack from Pence at Kaine, no?
I agree.
There's places too where Kaine and Clinton clearly diverge too, and he's going to have to answer for those. But you mentioned this difficult balancing act that they're going to have to walk. It's also a difficult balancing act for the moderator, because she's going to have to try to pin them down on some of these issues and give the American public some of that specific policy debate that they've actually wanted to see, or at least they say that they want to see.
I think she'll have
Shout out, by the way, to Elaine Quijano, the first Asian American to moderate a debate. My Asian Americans out there, I know you feel me.
And I think she's going to have an easier job on that front than Lester Holt did,
Yes.
because these two men, as LZ said, they are gentlemen. So I suspect it will be a little bit more civil, at least vis-a-vis the moderator.
Well, shout out to Elaine. Shout out also to Walt Hickey from 538, who joins us right
Walt.
here. Thanks for being here. That was your shout out. Do you like it?
Thank you for having me.
We're going to have that every time you come on. So talk to us about what we expect to see tonight. We know Clinton got a little bit of a bump, right? Coming out of that last first debate. So can anything happen tonight that helps or hurts the candidates?
Yeah, vice presidential debates are pretty interesting in this kind of regard. We don't really see them have a huge effect on the polls. The idea is like you're not going to change your mind on this presidential ticket that you've had a thought on for a while just because of a vice presidential debate. It's like, again, like three-dimensional chess in a lot of ways. Not a lot of folks are watching, and the ones who do don't know what's going on. Yeah, multi-level chess too.
We kind of got what you were saying.
Yeah, but you said before that it probably won't change people's minds. But 10% of people in the polls are saying that actually it could change their mind, and that's not nothing in a tight election, no?
Yeah, but part of this is that what we're looking at is an election where currently, according to the 538 election model, we are looking at 16% of the populace is not backing one of the two major party tickets. So there's a lot of folks who are up in the air. Now, granted, a lot of those have an affinity for either Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate, or primarily Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate. Yeah, still.
Johnson's still a thing.
Still showing up,
Even after all the oops and I don't remember and I can't name a... Still.
Yeah, big in Colorado, New Mexico, you'd be shocked. Yeah, but again, a lot of models kind of discount that for a bit. But I mean, if he's showing up in the polls and these folks seem sincere about it, we are counting it. So, but the main idea to kind of get into here is like 16% of the electorate that we are looking at right now is not currently affiliated with one of these candidates. So yeah, there's absolutely folks up for grabs tonight, but the effect that this is going to have versus the effect that the following two debates are going to have, or the previous presidential debate, it's not as big that we can kind of see. Again, Sarah Palin took the stage and didn't make it all a dent on the McCain bid, right? It's just not as big of a huge poll effect that we would expect. But again, that doesn't mean that there's no negative downside. The idea is if you have a big screw up tonight, then you can guarantee that they're going to be talking about that for a bit. Everybody's going to be playing a little bit of defense. It behooves them to kind of focus on policy a bit. Again, the Pew Research Center said that about 64% of Americans that they polled want to see more policy in this election. This is a perfect opportunity for them to do that. You're going to see a lot of work from Mike Pence tonight trying to back up the policy credentials of his boss. So yeah, it's going to be a busy debate. It's going to be a lot of folks trying to hit a whole bunch of different markers. But as for the poll effects, it hasn't really shown up that much in the past.
I saw on the website 538 that the probability rate for Hillary Clinton has steadily been increasing. But I couldn't tell if that was pre-first debate or post-first debate.
Yes. Great question. The idea is that with a lot of these polls, they take time to do. They take 3, 4, 5 days to run one of these polls in a given state. We did not know immediately after the debate what that effect would be. We do know now what that effect is. The idea is that over the past week, we've seen these polls come in, typically end of last week, early this week, and they have kind of shown pretty decisively that Hillary Clinton's ahead. I know yesterday, looking at the 20 polls that we had seen in states since the debate, 18 of them showed Clinton ahead compared to previously, where it was kind of rather split. She wasn't ahead in a decisive amount of them. It was a very, very close race. So we did see a rather significant bump for Clinton's camp. As for tonight, we don't exactly know what effect this could have. Again, we're talking about two candidates that the plurality of people rather do not have an opinion on.
So after the last debate, a lot of pundits, I don't want to name any names, but his initials are LZ Granderson rather, said that they didn't think it was going to move the needle, but she has gotten a bounce. But maybe LZ was right in that it just bounced her back to where she was before.
Yeah, so keep in mind
Which
as well.
What I meant.
Yes. No, I know that. I've got your back.
Our favorite thing as stats folk is like correlation is not causation. So we don't exactly know. Was it the debate that did it? What we do know, well, she had a tough week before that, if you remember. She had pneumonia coming off that. She had a rather difficult news cycle. Again, it was just things weren't going in her direction for the 2 weeks prior to the debate. It was very much a reset that we kind of saw. So perhaps it got just kind of moved past a cycle that was not great for her. She again appeared to faint into a car outside of the 9/11 memorial.
Never a good look.
Never a good look at all. It's almost like if your husband starts like trashing Obamacare. It's just not a good look. Yeah, you want to avoid that at all possible. But the idea is that she was coming off a rough news cycle, and she had a pretty decisive win last week. And so whether it was the win, whether it was just the time, like the rear view mirror of all that, we did see a pretty solid shift in the polls this past week. Now, again, nothing's confirmed. She went from being, if you look at the national polling average, up about a point to up about 4 points, which is pretty significant. But again, it's still a ballgame.
So walk me through, I don't know if you guys have seen these, the favorable and unfavorables on Tim Kaine and Mike Pence. I found these alarming.
Yeah.
Well, just because whoever ends up in this office is literally a heartbeat away from the presidency.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of Americans are sort of like, meh, about both of them. Do you have those numbers?
I do, yeah. So again, this is a CBS News poll. It was done by phone of registered voters. Favorability, Tim Kaine, 19%, Mike Pence, 24%. Unfavorability, Tim Kaine, 13%, Mike Pence, 19%. Here's the wonderful number. People who don't know or don't have an opinion, Tim Kaine, 67%, Mike Pence, 57%.
Don't know or don't have an opinion.
Yeah. So, again, like you were saying earlier, tonight we were seeing a debate between the patriarch of the Partridge Family and the guy who ran the Brady Bunch. We don't know a lot about
There we go. There we go.
That's all I asked.
He had
specifics.
his parents let him watch television.
Lots
What do you
of
want me
it,
to tell you? I mean, there was a great little bit that our friends over at Bloomberg Politics did, where they went out with the pictures of the VP candidates on the street and showed them to people, and nobody knew who they were. Some people were like, "Oh, are they pro golfers? They look like they're from the golf world."
Well, only 14 VPs have actually gone on to become president themselves, and 8 of those were because the president died or was assassinated. So the heartbeat away thing, while it's true, it's only really happened 8 times.
But these are two older candidates,
Right.
Yeah. Designated Survivor on ABC 7. It's really like it does show up historically.
Yes, exactly.
It does show up historically that absolutely there is the effect that older candidates do need to have a strong VP. A strong VP will allow them to reach out to new communities. We saw what happened in the state of Virginia. Virginia went from being a pretty decisive swing state to it's pretty strongly in the Clinton camp at this point. And again, a large part of that is like Tim Kaine is very popular in that state among independents and Democrats and even some Republicans in areas. He's a longstanding you can kind of see this in a lot of states. Indiana, we've got a somewhat competitive Senate election there, but when it comes to the presidential race, we're rather assured that it's going to go into the GOP side. So.
Which makes you wonder why did you pick that move in terms of the electoral map? Like, if you look and you go, well, I'm going to get Indiana no matter what, I don't need to pick the unpopular governor in order to lock that up, because I kind of already have that in my hip pocket.
He was pretty explicit that it wasn't about, it wasn't an electoral move.
Did you say Trump was pretty explicit about something? Did you just say that? That's so cute.
He was clear about something, that he was trying to unify the party.
And then he said afterwards, well, I just kind of did it just to do it.
There was no electoral play with Newt Gingrich, who was apparently the other guy on the guy on the other side of the coin toss. So.
John
Pence
Kasich
gave
stopped
him
taking his
cover,
calls.
right?
Yeah.
John
He gave
Kasich
him
stopped
cover
taking
so
his
the
calls.
whole establishment could actually say, yes, we're behind this ticket
Right.
to some degree.
Notwithstanding the fact that LZ's already heckling me, we're like 15 minutes into this thing.
You started it.
No, I did start it. I do love
Star
you, though.
one won't be none.
It's really all the debate
Don't
doesn't
start
even begin
one,
until 9.
There won't be none. Well, let's do a drinking game. Which candidate will say those words tonight during the debate? I got my money on Pence. Speaking of Virginia, let's go to Virginia now, because ABC's Mary Alice Parks is in the spin room talking to all sorts of people. I believe this is Senator Mark Warner. Let's hear what he has to say. Let's listen in.
Marines,
Right.
he's right, but his kids, kind of like my kids are about the same age as, so both have kind of gone through living in the governor's mansion and what that means and how awkward that sometimes is, if you're a teenager. And I think he had a little better preparation since his wife Anne had actually lived in the governor's mansion before, since her dad had been governor.
Right.
So, I think we both have kind of gone through what's it like to have families go through the public spotlight when your kids are teenagers.
So it's unique. You know Senator Tim Kaine well. You are also from Virginia. What does it mean to a school like this, to the state, that they get to host the VP debate?
It's very cool. And, the thing is, this part of Virginia has got an extraordinary history. This is not only a big part of Virginia history, but national history.
We've been talking about that a lot today, yeah.
The Civil War kind of came to an end in the outskirts of Prince Edward County. And then back in 1951, a brave young woman, 16-year-old named Barbara Johns, against the advice of her parents, pastor, and everyone else, said she wasn't going to go to this crummy second-rate school anymore, and led a student walkout that ended up becoming a legal case that was part of the Brown versus Board of Education. And in fact, If it had been done not alphabetically, that would have been the case. That would have been the Barbara Johns, the Prince Edward case. At the same time, after that courage, this area and a couple other areas in Virginia, they shut down their schools for 6 years rather than integrate. And it was only in the early part of this century, when I was governor and Tim was lieutenant governor, that Virginia kind of made that right. We went back and offered, in fact, scholarships to those families, many of my age and Tim's age, who lost 5 or 6 years of school. And it didn't make it right, but it was, again, kind of a little bit of the story of Virginia and our country. It's 2 steps forward, sometimes 1 step back. And so an awful lot of history right here in this part of the Commonwealth.
So a lot of history in Virginia schools. I'm joined by Senator Mark Warner, and we're expecting that a Virginia University makes a little bit more history here tonight.
Well, I think
what are you expecting from tonight?
I think you're going to see in Tim, people will see that genuineness, they'll see that optimism. I think he'll have a plan that Hillary Clinton has laid out. How we're going to grow our economy, how we're going to keep our country safe, how do we grapple with the changing nature of our economy, as particularly more and more millennials switch up jobs as rapidly as they do. I don't know Governor Pence. I think he's got to have a tough job. How do you explain all of the antics of just the past week of Donald Trump? I mean, I was a business guy for 20 years, and the thing about Trump that is a little baffles me. Every successful business person, there's usually a lot of people that will go out and validate that business success, people that have done well because they've worked with the person, or people who've got great stories about him. This guy with Trump, one, we don't know how successful he is since he doesn't release his taxes, but we do know he stiffs his subcontractors. He's got a foundation that basically has been shut down because it violated part of New York law. We don't know which countries he's done business with. We know he doesn't like to pay taxes. So I don't understand, how Governor Pence is going to explain away.
But do you think that will be the focus tonight? Will Tim Kaine get up there and really talk about some of these issues that have to deal with Pence's running mate?
Well, I think end of the day, people mostly, 80-90% are going to be based upon who's the top.
Right.
And I'm sure Governor Pence will try to attack Secretary Clinton as well. It's just, I've been around politics for a while. I try to pride myself as being very bipartisan. Again, I'm a business guy longer than I'm in politics. I just scratch my head when I continue to see this moving train wreck that is called the Trump presidential campaign. I think increasingly Americans are realizing there's no way in the world that this guy should be anywhere close to the White House.
So you can tell we are already in the spin room. We are getting some good spin already from Senator Warner. No, I appreciate it. It's nice to have you. It's nice to have you join us. But I am curious. We have this idea. What we often see on TV is Senator Tim Kaine kind of soft-spoken. There's jokes. He's sort of the senator, the running mate that looks like your dad. He plays the harmonica. How cute! Could he get up there and be an attack dog? Does he have some of that fight?
Well, listen, he's run tough races for lieutenant governor, for mayor, for governor, for senator. He knows how to get up and challenge someone. But I think normally what people have said about Tim is even if they disagree with him, he will challenge you in a way, though, that's not personal and vindictive. And the best evidence of that is when he got named to be Hillary's running mate, and you folks in the press went out and said, well, let's do the story and see what Republicans will say bad things about him. They couldn't get anybody to say anything bad about it. They said, I may disagree with him, but all of his fellow Republican colleagues in the Senate were almost uniformly complimentary. That, in today's politics, where people are sick, I think, of the kind of personal attack time over time, I think that'll be really refreshing.
Really interesting. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us before all of this. And I am going to now say goodbye to you, and we'll probably try to. We're going to be back in this room after the debate.
I'll be back in full spin
we can pull you over for more spin
Right.
after the debate. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. It was great to talk to you. Okay, but you guys stay with us because I am now going to talk to one of our most talented reporters, a big friend of mine, right? Someone that I admire and can't say enough nice things about. Okay, Brad, how's it going?
Well,
you're going to follow a senator right here.
That's no problem because you heard it right there, right? Tim Kaine is the folksiest guy,
right.
He's just like your dad. He's going to be telling some jokes. He'll tell some zingers. And I'm starting to realize that is the role of these candidates tonight, right? To fill the gaps that maybe the top of the ticket doesn't have. So for Hillary Clinton, it seems like, somebody who can have some zeal up there, be really, likable is the word everyone keeps tossing around, be this sort of magnetic personality.
We're going to take it back from Farmville,
and show all the things that
Virginia, where Brad is holding forth. If you want to see Brad hold forth in greater detail, you can go to ABC Live 5. Is that what we're calling it?
Yeah.
You know what you're doing here.
What are you calling it?
I don't know. I'm going to rebrand everything in here tonight. Yeah. It's a multi-level,
multifaceted.
thing that I've
Dan
got going
Harris
here.
is Channel 5.
We're going to rebrand Kristen Soltis Anderson. She's already been rebranded by you guys as KSA.
The notorious
KSA.
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 You could name channel number 5 the Cinco.
I like it. Yeah, a little style.
That's
I like the
Just an
Cinco.
idea.
It's
Just throw it out there.
It's all about branding.
So, what's the state of the race in your view? We should tell everybody who you are. You are a Republican pollster. What is the state of the race as we go into this vice presidential debate? And does this debate stand any chance of making any impact from a polling standpoint?
There are very few people that have very strong opinions about either of the men we are going to hear from tonight. So I suspect unless either of them makes big news, if Mike Pence says something that is really wildly different than what Donald Trump would say, or he's got to spend 90 minutes defending Donald Trump. If at any point there seems to be a fissure there or a crack in that sort of unity, I imagine people will pounce on that. On the other hand, Tim Kaine is going to have to sort of defend a lot of things that people have criticized about Hillary Clinton. He, I think, has proven that he's a pretty good defender of Clinton out on the campaign trail thus far. So I think his job is actually a little easier. He just has to hold serve, don't mess up, whereas I think it'll be harder, can Pence sustain for 90 minutes defending a lot of the stuff that Donald Trump's done over the last week. So since I was last here with you all, we had the debate, and some new polls have come out, and it's showing that Clinton has sort of retaken the lead that she had coming out of the conventions, that 4 or 5 point national lead. In a state like Pennsylvania, a poll came out today showing that she's up by 10. I mean, the electoral math just looks so hard for Donald Trump. He didn't make any ground up after that last debate, lost maybe a point or two, and it's unclear to me that he has a real opportunity to dramatically change this race. I think it will take something much bigger than anything that might happen here in tonight's VP debate to change the shape of the race. But there
are 2 more presidential debates. Aren't those opportunities to change the dynamic?
So those 2 potentially are. Tonight, I think, is less so because it's not the principals on the stage. But I think certainly if in the next debate Hillary Clinton does something that is dramatically bad or gets really flubs a question, maybe there's an opening, but that also requires that Donald Trump put in a performance for a full 90 minutes that looks more like the first 20 minutes of the debate last time, where he did seem more on message, talking about the economy and trade issues that are pretty good for him. He started to kind of fall apart when it got into things like taxes and such, and so with another 2 sets of, I think, are the next 2 debates 90 minutes long, plus the one is that town hall format. I mean, Donald Trump's really got to sort of stay on script if he wants to get back to those poll numbers that he was at before the last debate.
You mentioned some of those cracks and fissures, and certainly even Walt Hickey was saying this, a lot of what they have to do tonight is just play defense, right? There's a lot of potential downside if they make a big mistake and very little potential upside to make up even some of the numbers. But for Pence in particular, there's a lot of daylight between him and Donald Trump when it comes to policy, and also just on, in this campaign season, he wasn't always endorsing Mr. Trump as candidate, and before he was selected was actually coming out very publicly and saying, I don't agree with the potential Muslim ban, it's unconstitutional, it's offensive. And how does he make up for those things tonight?
That's why he's got the much harder job. He's going to have to do a lot more dancing over the next 90 minutes. And I think that not only does he have a harder job on that front, but also he's got to make the case to other Republicans who feel or felt the way he felt, uncomfortable with Donald Trump, not loving some of the things he said, really having big questions. Wait, you lost $1 billion? Wait, why were you tweeting about a sex tape? Wait, what's going on? If you're somebody that's got those reservations, there's a chance that Mike Pence can come out tonight and say, look, I've had those reservations too. I'm speaking to you and saying, he's cool. He's with me and he's cool.
Well, that's interesting if he actually says it, especially that way, because I don't think I've heard him say he's cool, ever.
It's not part of the talking points.
I don't think so. Could be. My question to you is, during the last debate, he was together, Donald Trump was together for those first 20 minutes or so. And then Hillary Clinton's question, and we talked about this, about his father and giving him the money, sort of began the spiraling down, in terms of getting under his skin. Now that we have these new numbers out, that his father may have not only just helped him start, but actually keep him afloat, obviously she's going to use that to attack him again. Do you think he's going to be able to now handle that attack and make it through 90 minutes, or is that going to be his undoing once again?
I wouldn't bet on it. I mean, he has not shown during this campaign kind of the ability to stay on message for sustained periods of time. You've seen him kind of wobble back and forth between maybe a week when it seems like maybe his aides have taken his phone from him and he's kind of on a consistent message about Hillary Clinton. She's in the pocket of the rich. She represents the status quo. And then all of a sudden, he does something like his rally last Saturday in Pennsylvania, where starts bringing up things like Bill Clinton's affairs, and it just kind of goes. The shopping cart goes way off the rails. That's the analogy that I've used before. It's like a shopping cart with a broken wheel. You can try to push it straight down the aisle, but eventually it wants to turn and knock over all the cereal. And
Did you say that your theme of the night is clean up on aisle 9?
Oh, well, there you go.
Convergence here.
Exactly. So if you're a Republican and you're hoping that Donald Trump can just put on presidential face for the next 2 debates, you've got to hope that what Mike Pence can do to tee that up is make that argument. Look, you may not love him, but I'm a dyed-in-the-wool conservative. Trust me, he's okay.
And there's Mike Pence arriving in Farmville, Virginia.
I think he just said he's cool.
Yeah. You reading his lips?
Yeah.
He's arriving for what will be, I think we can safely say, the biggest night of his political career at Longwood University, where the debate will start at 9 Eastern. A lot of people asking us on Facebook, when's the debate going to start? Starts at 9 Eastern, runs until 10:30 Eastern. Again, the moderator, Elaine Quijano from CBS. But let's just talk, as we're looking at these pictures, we were talking a little bit about the next presidential debate, which is coming up this Sunday, and what the dynamics going to be there. There's a huge X factor, which is there's going to be a live audience. It's town hall style situation, co-moderated, we should say, by our own Martha Raddatz, who's a rock star and does use the word cool with some regularity, and also I've heard her say the word Cinco. I would say that makes it more complicated if you want to be hurling insults. Real voters don't really like that.
Yeah, won't only have to be responsive to someone who, like Lester Holt, was trying to more or less play referee, but kind of stay out of the fray for the most part. I mean, here you will have actual voters that will be asking directly. I mean, this won't just be I'm a journalist saying, Donald Trump, you've said horrible things about people. What would you say to voters? Like, I mean, this will be an actual voter, perhaps a woman, perhaps someone from the Latino community saying, why do you say things like this about people like me? And that's harder to dance out of. But
it's also harder for Hillary Clinton to attack him on, your daddy gave you money type of stuff, because it's just a tougher arena in which to deliver insults effectively.
And she typically has not played well in large groups in front of cameras, whereas Donald Trump seems to know how to charm a room.
Yeah.
So you do have that X factor there.
Yeah.
That even if what he says is still offensive, he says it in such a way that's so folksy and affable that it doesn't come across as offensive until you go home and go, wait a minute, he insulted me. Whereas she comes across, even if it's from the heart, as stilted, as calculated. The question is, can she? And you have begun to see that over the last week and a half after the debate, because she's now doing what? Press conferences all of a sudden, and she's smiling and she's doing interviews with Mary J. Blige, and she's like, hey, I'm cool, like me. And who hasn't done a press conference? Donald Trump. So it's curious to see if what's happened during the debate has forced him to switch roles, and once he gets in front of a large crowd, whether or not she's going to maintain this likable, hey, I'll take your question to Hillary, and if he's going to be, don't ask me anything, Trump, or are they going to go back to the roles that we've seen them over the last 365 days?
I think another big question that I'm looking for over the next week is, he's hinted at these rallies that he's going to bring up things like potentially bringing up Bill Clinton's past infidelities.
Well, he said it in the spin room.
And he said it in the spin room.
Yeah.
I was going to, but I didn't want to because Chelsea was there. But now he's sort of making the case. Maybe the gloves will have come off. Some polling that came out just on Monday said that 56% of voters said that they think it's inappropriate if Trump goes there, including 62% of women. So if Trump gets provoked and decides, you know what, gloves are off, I'm just going to unleash everything, does that really badly backfire on him? But he just can't help himself.
It seems like so few things have backfired. But I can't tell you how many times over the last year I've interviewed somebody like you and said, well, is this the thing? He just insulted a handicapped reporter. He just insulted Senator McCain. He just insulted Mexicans. And over, people are like, oh, yeah, this is going to get him in trouble. But here we are in a very close race.
Well, it's somewhat of a close race. I would argue that Hillary Clinton being up 4 or 5 points is not actually that close. I mean, it's actually
within the MOE in some of these polls?
In a state poll, perhaps. But I mean, bear in mind that Mitt Romney lost by 3 points and lost in the Electoral College by huge margins. So I mean, 3 points actually can turn into a pretty big lead in the Electoral College. I mean, I'd still much rather be in Clinton's shoes than Trump's shoes, given what the polling says right now. But you're right, this is a strange election. You never quite know.
That's a true statement. We showed you earlier Governor Mike Pence entering the building there at Longwood University. We can also share with you that Senator Tim Kaine is in the building, so they are both now there. And we can go live now to Longwood, where our own Cecilia Vega joins us. She has been with the Clinton-Kaine camp there. Cecilia, it's a big night for Tim Kaine. They've said he has to sort of reintroduce himself again to a national audience. But what do we know about how he's been preparing for tonight?
You know, it's sort of, it seems like it's the Hillary Clinton model of debate prep that he's going with here. He's been knee deep in briefing books. I'm told by aides that are close to him and have been following him over the last few weeks that he's a policy wonk, just like Hillary Clinton. That's the narrative they're trying to sell right now. Not just that, she did a ton of mock debates leading up to her big showdown with Donald Trump last week. Same for Tim Kaine. In fact, interestingly enough, the Clinton campaign has been really heavily involved. High-ranking officials from the Clinton campaign have been involved in Tim Kaine's debate prep. So the same person who played Bernie Sanders for Hillary Clinton's mock debate is the same person who's playing Mike Pence for Tim Kaine and his lead-ups to this. He's been down in Raleigh mostly working on his debate preps, but he's here tonight and ready for this big showdown. The Clinton team says there's some pressure on him, and he certainly is feeling it. Tim Kaine said recently that after Hillary Clinton's performance last Monday, or Tuesday, I can't even remember what day of the week it is anymore, you guys, that he feels like the pressure is on for him to really perform tonight. I guess it's on for me too. I don't even know what day it is right now.
There's no pressure on you. As far as we're concerned, Cecilia, you can do no wrong. And that lasts even past the election. I just want to be clear about that. Okay,
I want that in writing.
I'll send it to you. It'll be an email. And may get deleted later. But you said, or you sent out an email internally earlier to the ABC News staff about what you were hearing from the Team Clinton about their expectations for tonight. And one of the things you mentioned was that they actually expect Pence to come out swinging because he's going to have to make up for the perceived defeat of his boss at the last debate. Do you think that's actually true, or is that kind of a weird jujitsu expectation setting thing that the Clinton folks are doing?
That is definitely the spin. But I'll tell you, whether it's spin or not, their mindset going into this, and maybe this is something that they need to tell Tim Kaine to perform well tonight, is that really the pressure is on the other team right now. The big thing that Tim Kaine has to do on this stage tonight, in one sense, is really simple. He needs to not screw this up. I mean, the Clinton campaign has been riding this wave of momentum over the last week. I've been on this campaign for a year and a half, and I will tell you, I've never seen Hillary Clinton like I've seen her over the last week and a half. I mean, one day on the campaign plane, the day after the debate, she felt like she was skipping back there to see the press corps. And this is a candidate who certainly doesn't look forward to seeing us on a regular basis. I mean, she was like howling. She was laughing so hard the day after the debate. So there's this definite air about them right now, and I think they're trying to project that onto to Tim Kaine tonight. But look, he's got another job at hand here, and preparing for this debate and the other side has been really tough for him because he essentially has to debate two people up there, right? He's got to take on his opponent, the direct opponent sitting at that table right across from him. He's also got to take on his opponent for Donald Trump, and really the goal tonight will be to nail him on some of Trump's policies. We know for a fact that he's going to go hard on taxes. We know for a fact that he's going to go hard on things like Alicia Machado and what Donald Trump said in the last debate about women and some of the stuff he said over the course of this campaign about women. And they're going to really try and hold Mike Pence to Donald Trump's policies and try to get him to either support them or disavow them. So in that sense, it's a tough goal. I do know our team knows from talking to people on the inside of this campaign that when and if there will be fireworks, they will come early on. They expect Tim Kaine to come out swinging in the first 30 to 45 minutes because their fear is people might not watch. We know not our viewers. Our viewers will stay for the entire thing, of course, but their fear is
good save, Vega.
Turn off. I mean, duh. So they're going to come out swinging early on.
You know, I'm curious about Tim Kaine in terms of his future. He's only in his early 50s. We know that there have been 14 vice presidents that have gone on to become presidents themselves. Does he have his eye on more than just being vice president?
You know, and the one of the interesting things about Tim Kaine is how the Clinton campaign and his campaign is using tonight as an opportunity to basically sell him to the American public. He's only really had 3 shots at this, and tonight being the biggest. Can you guys hear like this voice of God that's over me right now? I'm sorry if that's distracting. Someone telling us to turn off all of our wireless microphones. But they, you know, look, they introduced him on the national stage when Hillary Clinton picked him as his running mate. So that was a big moment for him. Of course, his big speech at the DNC, his second big shot, but he's never had an audience as big as this one. And he's a lawyer basically, and has turned senator, of course, and a politician in that. But he really tonight needs to introduce himself. There was an interesting thing that's been floating around on the internet today, where someone took photos of Tim Kaine and Mike Pence out on the streets of New York. If you guys saw it, and tried to get people to name who they were, most people couldn't even do it. So it just shows you how high the bar is tonight for these guys to really have to introduce themselves. So you look, if you're on the VP ticket, if you're on the ticket at all, clearly you've got your eyes on the bigger prize. We'll see if he can pull it off and start by introducing himself out here tonight, guys.
Cecilia, thank you so much. Go watch the debate. We'll talk to you afterwards, we hope. Enjoy. Let's bring it back to KSA. I keep wanting to call her KRS-One. Remember KRS-One?
Yep.
Great rapper from the
It's
80s
just
and 90s.
us. Does anyone else call you KSA?
You're too young.
My colleagues at the Washington Examiner also call me KSA.
They do.
So you are not
Awesome.
alone. You are not alone.
But not notorious KSA.
Not
That's just
notorious
me.
KSA. That's just you. So
I feel very special. Thank you very much.
Just you, she said.
I think you feel special for that, and that you had the courage, which is paying off, to wear a burgundy suit on the air tonight, which is just awesome.
Is it courage?
I think it's
the
courage.
style.
Yeah.
Burgundy is the color this season.
I mean, I would never.
True.
I don't think I could pull it off, but I admire you.
You can pull it off.
You think so?
I wouldn't try though.
Okay. Wow.
I don't know what we're talking about.
See the shit you just put in my back. But we were talking about the polls earlier. I'm going to change the subject before we get too deeply into my lack of style. We were talking about the polls before, and you were saying that you think 4 to 5 points actually is a significant lead in this atmosphere. Do you have any fear, suspicion at all that people aren't telling pollsters the truth, that they actually are going to vote for Trump but don't want anybody to know? They don't even want their significant other to know?
Sure. So this is a real fear and a big concern that pollsters have. Anytime you're doing a survey on something that is there's something called social desirability bias, where people give pollsters the answer that they think the pollster wants to hear. And so you saw a little bit during the primary where Donald Trump would do much better in online polls versus phone polls. And there was a suspicion that part of that's because when you're doing an online poll, you're not telling another human being verbally over the phone, yes, I'm voting for Donald Trump. So that was a suspicion in the polling world. So sure, there's a chance that there are men who are sitting in the dining room taking that survey, and their wife is kind of within earshot, and they get asked, who are you voting for? And they say, Hillary Clinton, but actually they're going to go pull the lever for Trump. But that cuts the other direction. It's just as likely that there are women sitting at the dining room table taking that survey. Their Trump supporter husbands hanging around, and they're like, I'm voting for Trump, but they're really voting for Clinton. So this is an election where, because both candidates are so disliked, you can envision an incentive to kind of lie or fib or say, I'm undecided, instead of actually confessing what you're going to do. So it does mean that there's a chance that Trump will have more, I think, particularly college-educated men. I think that's a group where he's performed somewhat weaker. We talked when I was here last time about how he struggled with some of those groups. That could be a group where there are folks saying, oh, I'm not voting for Trump, but when push comes to shove, they do. But it's just as likely that there are women who are saying, oh, I don't really like Hillary Clinton, I can't see myself voting for her, but on election day, they pull the lever for her. So this is always a fear that pollsters have, that we're getting it wrong because there's a slice of the public that is misrepresenting their views. But it can cut both ways. So I don't know that it necessarily means Trump's got a hidden 5 points out there that we're just not detecting.
Like the Bradley effect in Los Angeles?
Yeah, you've got the Bradley effect. In Virginia, they call it the Wilder effect, where in that case it was people not saying that they were going to vote for an African-American candidate, but then on election day they actually didn't pull the lever. And people have wondered, do people feel an incentive to say what they think is the right answer, but then they don't do it? In this election, with both candidates being so disliked, it could go either way.
Quick programming note I do want to point out, because I think a lot of people out there have been wondering and continue to ask when the debate actually starts. It's 10 past 8 right now here on the East Coast, 9 o'clock Eastern it begins, and stay with us here because we will be streaming it live. So coming up in less than an hour now. And I also want to point out, if you're on an ABC News digital platform and you've got some other channels to flip around to, over on Live Channel 8, I'm not sure if we can go there right now, Kenneth Moton has somehow found his way to the feed yet again.
This is the Ocho?
This is, the Ocho, as we call it, here at ABC News Digital.
Like a heart attack in a bun.
It's PJ Clark's down in Washington, D.C. I think they have specialty burgers named after the candidasts.
And they have a defibrillator standing by.
And one might even with all that beef there.
So if you want to watch that and just salivate, Live Channel 8 is the place for you. Back here.
LZ wouldn't eat that because he doesn't do carbs.
He doesn't, although he did. Can I out you?
I do carbs.
The biggest news of the night, actually, bigger than anything, is that you had a slice of pizza tonight.
I actually had 2 slices.
2 slices,
Yeah,
wow.
I didn't eat the full crust. I did inhale. Did not inhale. Question for you.
He's trying to change the subject. This is like my style.
A little bit.
for
Did you
him.
like that?
This is what I'm here for. Anytime the subject gets uncomfortable, just throw it back to me. We'll get it back to a safe place.
Bring it back to KRS-One.
I'm curious about the impact that the libertarians, the Green Party, that they're having on this election. Now, we know that Johnson got over 1 million votes in 2012. We're anticipating he's going to have even more votes now. Are we getting to that place now where the third-party candidate is no longer a pipe dream, but come 2020 may actually be a reality?
Well, in this election, it's an election that's ripe for a third-party candidate to do really well, precisely because so many voters dislike the major parties and dislike the major party candidates. And so Johnson has been somewhat strong in places like Colorado, New Mexico. I think Nate Silver at 538 put out a map earlier this week showing if New Mexico actually went to Johnson for some reason, because he's the former governor of that state, then all of a sudden that throws the Electoral College into question, and you could have a weird situation where no one gets to 270 and the House of Representatives has to pick someone. So I think he likes putting these scary maps out there to freak everyone out about potentially insane outcomes.
Thank you.
But
Drives traffic, I
but sure, I mean, there is poll data to suggest that Gary Johnson does pretty well in some of these western states. But we still have a system that, for better or worse, is really structurally built for 2 candidates to be strong, because it is this first past the post system, instead of a parliamentary system like you have in Europe, where you can have 5 or 6 different parties all competing. Here, instead of a third party, it's more likely that maybe one party would just sort of fade and another party would take its place. But we've always kind of had 2 parties, and it's because of a lot of the stuff that's baked into the Constitution that just makes it easier for the system to work out that way.
Well, the other thing we don't talk about third-party candidates at any other time than presidential election cycles, which is not how you start a third party. Like, you start at the local level, you start at the municipal level, and we never really hear much about them until it's time to elect a president.
And even in the case, so Bernie Sanders, who is not actually technically a Democrat, he is an independent in the U.S. Senate. He caucuses with the Democrat. But even in cases where you have people who are independents and do make it to Congress, or they get to Congress and then they leave their party, they're still kind of caucusing with one of the major parties. And it's never in really enough numbers to make a difference. If you are in a parliamentary system and your party is getting 8% of the vote, you're getting some slice of people in the parliament, in Congress. Here, if you're getting 8% of the vote everywhere, you're getting 0 people in Congress, because you have to get that kind of first past the post plurality somewhere. 8% is just not cutting it.
In your estimation, where has this shift happened? When you go back and you look at the quotes from the founding fathers, particularly as they talk about the 2-party system being the death of this country and that we should not have it, clearly they did not want this scenario that we have today. In your estimation, when you look back, when did that great shift happen where we sort of had, multiple parties, not big strong units as we do today, obviously, but still multiple parties, multiple perspectives, to where we are now, where we're like hoping that a third person sort of pops up in the scenario.
You're asking her? She's still in her 20s. She wasn't around for any of this.
I'm not in my 20s.
None of us were around for it, but she's a student of history.
Well, yeah. Well, I think what's really fascinating is if you follow the history of campaign finance and campaign finance.
Yeah, Dan.
So you had the Supreme Court case, Buckley v. Vallejo, says money is speech. You can spend money, and that counts as political speech. That's protected. So now you have suddenly sort of the blessing for political parties to sort of amass a lot of money and spend it on elections, and it's fine, and it's protected First Amendment stuff. But then you had campaign finance reform, bipartisan campaign finance reform, McCain-Feingold, that really, I think, began the weakening of the actual party institutions themselves. So if I'm sort of going to invert your question, instead of when did we get two parties being strong, when did we actually begin to see the seeds planted that may lead to us perhaps having a third party that's stronger, not in 2020, but maybe in 2032, is that now these strong parties that used to be able to get all of this soft money from corporate donors and things, they can't anymore. Now that money all goes to super PACs. The campaigns themselves legally still can't take that money because McCain-Feingold says you can only take, I think for campaigns, it's something like $2,700, which to me sounds like an insane amount of money, but to a campaign is like chump change, and to some of these donors is chump change. So now all that money is going to these super PACs and these outside groups, meaning if you're the RNC or the DNC, you got a lot less money to work with. You have a lot less ways to put pressure on members of Congress, a lot less ways to put pressure on state parties. Now actually state parties have a lot of control because they've got voter lists that really matter. So we've begun to see, I think, the major parties themselves kind of struggling for what's our mission and purpose. The parties have stayed out of the policy-making business lately. You haven't seen the RNC or the DNC putting out policy papers yes, they adopt a platform at the convention, but even that kind of gets put aside in favor of individual candidates themselves. So if the parties aren't doing policy and they don't really have enough money nowadays to make big ad buys, what does a party do? And I think that's still a question that people are trying to answer.
She may be young, but she knows her stuff, guys. Notorious, thank you. We're looking at the inside the debate hall there in Farmville, Virginia, Longwood University. We just saw Donna Brazil and Terry McAuliffe work in the room. Another person who's there is ABC's Tom Yamas, who's been covering the Trump campaign for quite a while now. Tom, you with us? There he is.
Yeah, I'm there, Dan. I just have one stipulation to this interview. LZ's not going to ask me about the Whig Party or Millard Fillmore, right?
He might. He might.
Maybe.
Hope you've been boning up on Taft, because we've got a lot of arcana in our questions for you.
Spent a lot of time on flights, Tom. A lot of reading.
So how big a deal do you think this debate is? I mean, what's the view within Team Trump? Is tonight's debate consequential given the polling that shows that the public overwhelmingly believes he lost the first debate?
Yeah, historically, you want to kind of lower the bar when it comes to expectations in these big events, whether it be a big speech, a debate, even an election, for turnout, things like that. But the Trump campaign, before Donald Trump went into his first ever presidential debate against Hillary Clinton, they were calling him the Babe Ruth of debates. And an overwhelming majority of registered voters who saw that debate say Hillary Clinton won. So now we talk about Governor Mike Pence, and what we're hearing from the Trump campaign is one that we're going to see a feisty Mike Pence, which is an interesting word to use because Mike Pence, if you've seen him throughout this entire campaign, he's sort of been the Trump whisperer. He's sort of had to kind of fix some of the things that Trump has said, and he's very mild-mannered, a very nice guy. He doesn't like to use strong language. An effective speaker, don't get me wrong, but he's definitely not feisty. So it's interesting they're using that language. And also, he's been telling people, or at least his aides have, how much he's been preparing. He's got the policy books, those big binders that Trump said he wasn't using, and he's been doing the mock debates. Governor Scott Walker from Wisconsin, of course, has been playing Tim Kaine in those debates. And that's also something that Trump didn't do. He refused to do the mock debates. He'd rather kind of sit around in a circle with some of his aides and close friends and do question and answer periods. And from what we understand, Trump is still doing that for the next presidential debate. We do know that the top campaign aides wanted to kind of introduce the town hall format to Trump and kind of practice the way that looks to get Trump in that mode before his debate on Sunday.
Hey, Tom, we know to some degree that VP debates are really like proxy warfare, right? That they kind of have to ignore the things that they have said before and really just make the case for their candidate. But in instances where Pence and Trump have differed, and there are a few, what do we know about how he's prepared to handle some of those differences in making the case for his candidate?
I think if anything, if we do see that, I think Pence will be questioned about his record when it comes to gay marriage, when it comes to gay rights. He's been accused by some of being homophobic, and I think that's something that he knows may come up in this debate. That being said, Kaine, we know, is a very strong Catholic, but from what we understand, that may come up, and that's something that he will have to defend. Some of his policies he'll have to stand up for that he fought against. So we'll see if that becomes part of this debate as well. But I agree with you. I think Pence, if anything, will be trying to defend Donald Trump. I'm sure the tax issues Donald Trump has been talking about for the last week, that front page New York Times story. Pence is going to have to explain to people why Donald Trump essentially took a $900 million loss, which is a giant number. It's hard to even understand. And somehow, because he lost $900 million, he was able then to possibly not pay federal income tax for the next 18 years. Though legally you can do that, to wrap your head around that for the average voter, I think, who, $900,000 is a lot of money, $90,000 is a lot of money. To kind of wrap your head around that number, either way, even though he didn't do anything illegal, it's still a tough story to sell to some people.
Hey, Tom, can Pence go home again? When you look at the polling numbers in terms of his re-election campaign as governor, he's not doing so well. Is this sort of like his last hurrah in terms of politics?
It's an incredible question, because you may ask yourself, why would someone join Donald Trump, who, especially at that point when he joined the campaign, it was so unclear how he would do in this general election race. So has Governor Mike Pence upped his profile? The question is yes. People know who Governor Mike Pence is. Tonight, tens of millions of people will be watching this vice presidential debate, and he'll now be at the forefront of some of the highest named recognition when it comes to people in the Republican Party. That being said, he's had to defend Donald Trump's record, which is an ultra-right, very conservative, anti-immigrant, all types of policies that maybe he may not officially have wanted to run on, including, the building of the wall or the Muslim ban as well, things that he was not defending Donald Trump on during the primaries, but he's had to sort of walk back and accept and sort of kind of come under the Trump tent when it comes to those issues. So, LZ, it's a great question. If he does not become vice president, if they don't win this election, what happens to him going forward? But you also have to think, if Donald Trump doesn't win this, there are going to be so many Republican voters who turned out, who were so angry, who were so behind Donald Trump. You got to remember, Trump destroyed every single Republican primary candidate in his way. We talk about Florida. Trump won every single county in Florida except Senator Marco Rubio's county. So all those Trump voters are going to have to go somewhere. And if Pence is making a political calculation, he may be thinking in 4 years, maybe those Trump voters come to me and I run for president. Again, if he doesn't win, if they don't win.
Oh, Tom with a hot take.
All right,
I'm going deep on it, LZ, real deep.
I love it. And Tom, he spared you questions about the Whig Party this time, but just be ready for next time, all right?
I was brushing up. I was on Wikipedia looking up Millard Fillmore. I was like, okay, I got to know who this guy is. LZ's going to quiz me.
Solid resource right there, that Wikipedia. Way to go, Tom.
That's ABC's Tom Yamas live for us in Farmville, Virginia. Thank you, Tom. We'll talk to you in a bit. Hey, let's stick to Longwood University right now. John Carl is inside the debate hall for us live right now. John, you are in the room. Here's the thing that struck me when we looked at the picture inside there earlier. Unlike the presidential debate, where they were standing behind two podiums several feet apart from each other, these two men who are meeting for the first time face-to-face tonight are going to be sitting just a few feet apart. So what do you think the effect of that will be on the way that they go after each other tonight?
The Commission on Presidential Debates has been doing this for some time. This is the way you remember when Martha Raddatz had that great VP debate last time. You had Joe Biden and Paul Ryan sitting at the table. Dick Cheney and John Edwards in 2004 sat down together at a table. It makes for a very different dynamic. I think this is going to be a much more genteel affair. These are two very conventional running mates. In both cases, as different as Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are, as unusual as those two are in terms of presidential nominees. Hillary Clinton, a former first lady, Donald Trump, all that he is. These are two very different, breaking the mold candidates on the top, but their running mates are very conventional. And I think this will be a much more substantive affair, fewer sparks, less in the way of personal attacks. I think that when we come out of this debate, you'll hear a lot of people saying, gosh, I really wish those two guys would be at the top of the ticket, and then they'll probably quickly forget about this debate, because I don't imagine this will have much of an impact on the overall race. but it will be a very different type of debate, not just because of how they're seated, but because of who these two men are.
But John, in past vice presidential debates, we've had some moments that have stuck. Dole being called the hatchet man, Lloyd Benson putting the shiv into Quayle over John F. Kennedy. Is it possible that we could have some sort of moment that captures the public imagination and does change the dynamic in the race? Especially,
Dan,
especially given the fact that this is a year where we've had so many things that have never happened before.
Yeah, exactly. The bar's pretty high. But you didn't mention my favorite vice presidential moment. It was Admiral Stockdale, and not where he said, "Who am I and why am I here?" But if you remember, during that debate in 1992, when he, as Ross Perot's running mate, was there on the stage, he actually at one point responded to a question by saying, "Can you repeat it? My hearing aid was turned down. I couldn't hear you." And that to me was my absolute favorite moment. I mean, the guy got so sick of the bickering between the other two, he actually had his hearing aid turned down. But yeah, I mean, look, that's what makes these things so great, is you just don't know what's gonna take place. I think the fact, as you've mentioned, that these two have never met each other is really something, really speaks to who these two candidates are. I've been thinking about this, Dan, and I welcome you to challenge me on this, but I believe that these are the two most overshadowed vice presidential candidates of the modern era, both because they are relatively low-key and unknown, and because the people at the top of the ticket are so overwhelmingly well-known. These are superstar celebrities at the top, both of them, and two low-key running mates. I don't think we've ever seen a situation where you come in and most of the country, probably has to be reminded, A, that there are running mates, and B, that their names are Mike Pence and Tim Kaine.
I won't challenge you. I think that's accurate. Although I don't remember any of the running mates from the Whig era.
Yeah, no, I was saying the modern era, so I don't know. I mean, if you really think about it, who was it? Who was the guy with the big sideburns?
Gonna have to be more
Garfield's running mate. Come on.
The white guy with the hair.
Anyway, yeah, that guy. I mean,
So, John, I have a question for you. Will there be any space tonight for either Kaine or Pence to introduce themselves to the American people? Or is it all going to be about defending their running mates for 90 minutes?
Well, I mean, it's mostly going to be about defending their running mates, let's be clear, and also attacking the other running mate. But this is a tremendous opportunity for both of them. When this election is over, whoever wins, you can imagine that these two will be two leading candidates, leading possibilities to be the future nominees, and that's the way we've seen it unfold in previous elections. So this is a huge moment for both of them. It may be a relatively low-key moment in the course of this presidential campaign, but for these two, the audience could reach up to 50 million, even if it's on the low end of the estimates in the 30 millions. It is a massive audience, something far beyond what either of them have seen. The first time that much of the country will see them, will take in who they are. It's a big moment for each of them personally, and I believe that both of them were chosen. They were the leading. They were the candidates that you would have expected to have been chosen. I mean, Tim Kaine, for as low profile as he is an incredibly accomplished political figure. I mean, this is a guy that has held virtually every office in the land. He's been a governor, he's been a senator, he's been a city councilman, he's been the chairman of a major political party. And I think there is zero question that both of these men want to be president.
John Carl, I'd vote for you, just for the record.
Okay, good.
Thank you very much.
If you'll be on the ticket, I'll consider it, Dan. Okay,
yes, I'm going to grow some sideburns, and I will be your running mate. Really appreciate your...
Chester Arthur.
Chester Arthur.
I was thinking of Chester
There
Arthur.
We go.
Yes,
there we go. I think I have a painting of him in my office.
Dynamo.
John,
Yes.
thank you. I hope we'll get to talk to you after the debate. Let's bring in ABC's Cokie Roberts, who's here.
To talk about the Whig Party,
yes.
which of course I covered.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't. Let me ask you this. One of the things that's been talked about today is that we've had as explosive, as incendiary as this campaign has been, there's not been a lot of talk about the traditional social issues that have become the points of the most controversial points for so long in the culture wars in this country. We had a Republican nominee who gave a long acceptance speech at the convention without mentioning the word abortion. However, tonight we have two men who are openly of faith. One of them who's been deeply engaged in the culture wars, Mike Pence. Do you think this will come up?
Yes, absolutely. We didn't hear, you're right, anything about abortion, about gay marriage, about LGBT rights, religious freedom, all of that in the first debate. And I think you're likely to hear a good bit about it in this debate. Mike Pence is a very conservative governor. And in fact was in trouble in his reelection campaign before he was picked for vice president, partly because of that. And so he's got a record that he's going to have to defend, as well as Trump's record. But so does Kaine. And Kaine, as governor, ran saying that he would support the abortion restrictions that were already in place in Virginia, and there are people who feel strongly that his record is questionable. So I think both of them will be asked about their own situation as well as their running mates. But I think what's so interesting about tonight, there are a couple of things as I've listened to you all talking. First of all, it's remarkable to me that these two men have not met. I mean, in the olden days, when I was young and spry, the fact is that you would never have two men who had been governors and in Congress for as long as they have, who didn't know each other. I mean, that was those guys, and it was mostly guys, all knew each other.
You think this speaks to
the partisanship, the polarization, all of that. The fact that they have never met each other. But it's also true that because the running mates are not just bigger than life and all that, but they're so disliked by the majority of Americans in every poll that we do. I actually think tonight could be a fascinating moment, because there are people who are sitting here at home saying, gee, I really don't want to vote for him, or gee, I really don't want to vote for her, and looking for some reason to do it because they're naturally Republicans or naturally Democrats. And these running mates could give them the reason if they're appealing enough. So what I'm looking for is one of them actually being nice and coming across as somebody likable and maybe funny, and someone that you say, well, that guy makes me feel a whole lot more comfortable about her or about him.
That's raising the bar awfully high.
Huh?
That's raising the bar awfully high.
Right. Well, it is raising it high, but come on, nice, funny, how hard is that?
But that hasn't been what we've seen from them so far at all, has it been? I mean, out on the stump, they have both been already kind of launching attacks in the days leading up to tonight. And to some degree, it feels like the tradition for vice presidential debates has been to mirror what your candidate has been doing, which was go hard, go early, and get in as many digs as you can.
The main thing that they need to do, and everybody knows this and says this, is just not screw up,
right?
But not get off message from the candidates. But they can add to it and be more appealing. It is true that both of these men are in a position where they do want to go forward politically. This is not the end of either one of their political careers, in their view. And it's very similar. The first televised vice presidential debate was Mondale Dole in '76. And think about it, they each went on to many things, and certainly many runs, even if they didn't get elected. And so that's where these guys are. They are in a position where they see a future. And so it's not just about this campaign.
Is there a future, though, for old white men? I mean that.
Who speaks for the old white man anymore?
But I mean that, very genuinely, because when Kaine's name came out, there was amongst liberals sort of like going,
I hope there's a future, because I'm going to be an old white guy at some point.
In terms of being president of the United States, because, for example, when Kaine's name was mentioned, a lot of liberals were like going, how does she pick a boring white guy again when there are so many other options? When President Obama selected
it's so funny when you say that, because of course this is just like what happened when Hillary Clinton became Secretary of State, and people would come up to me and say, is there something about Secretary of State where it's kind of a job that is really something women have a special affinity for and they can do really well? There have been 3, right, since Thomas Jefferson. There's been one guy who wasn't an old white guy who was president of the United States. So I think they still have a future. Look around the boardrooms of America. You'd be surprised to know that there was anything but old white guys.
But but the narrative is the country's demographic is significantly changing.
It's changing, but it's still 70. I mean, the electorate in 2012 was still 72% white. It'll probably be 70% white this time around. So
okay, Dan, you're safe.
It doesn't erase history and all the cultural, socio and economic factors that just play to the advantage of white males.
Right. I mean, it's appalling, really, when you think about it.
Yeah, Dan.
No, I'll take the blame. It's just the truth.
Things could take a turn here, y'all.
You know, I felt with Donald Trump, for instance, in the last debate, all he really needed to do was walk into that room, be male, be tall, be calm, and seem presidential. And he failed at that. But that's all he really needed to do. And just last Sunday on This Week, Rudy Giuliani said, who would be better? For the country,
genius?
a businessman or a woman,
right?
So that's all still there.
You've had the view at times when we've chatted during the course of this cycle that Donald Trump was probably going to win this thing. Do you still believe that after last week's debate?
Well, I think is he still has the possibility of winning this, and I think the country is deeply divided, and it's basically tied. And things can sway it either way. We've got 5 weeks to go, and events can make an enormous difference in this kind of in any election, but it's particularly in this kind of environment.
2 more presidential debates. The possibility for October surprises. October has just begun.
That's true. Here we go.
Here we go, indeed. Koki,
I'll tell you who was the most overshadowed vice presidential candidate, not in recent times, but.
The board of directors of the commission itself, is made up of 16 prominent leaders from both the public and the private sectors. They are Democrats, Republicans, independents, and probably none of the above. But we are delighted that tonight we've got one of our members of the commission with us, the former president of the League of Women Voters and the president of the Council on Foundations. I'd ask Dorothy Riding, please stand up and take a bow. We are also pleased to have one of the original members of the Commission on Presidential Debates, the former Vice Chair, David Norcross. Now, one of the responsibilities of the Commission is to design the format for these debates, and 4 years ago we made a change to allow longer blocks of time for the candidates to engage each other and engage the issues. So tonight we will have a debate that's divided into 9 10-minute segments. Each one begins with our moderator posing a question. Only the moderator knows what those questions are. The Commission does not, the campaigns do not, and the candidates themselves do not. The debate also is very important, is for the public. And as Janet said, millions of people will be watching this. So it's very important that you respect the rest of our American citizens watching this debate by not interrupting this debate with any booing, cheering, clapping, or when my cousins in Georgia would say hooting and hollering. So please just be quiet and respect the time that the candidates have to be with each other to discuss the issues. Also, the use of cell phones, cameras, or electronic devices is also strictly prohibited. Now, if any of these ground rules are violated, you'll probably find yourself being asked to leave the hall. So please honor those rules. At about 9 o'clock live, back in the back, you'll hear a lot of commotion as our friends from the networks go live, so don't be disturbed by that. That's part of our process. And with that, I'd like to introduce a very good friend of mine, a partner, someone who I've enjoyed working with, Frank Fahrenkopf, the co-chair of the commission.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I want to join Mike and Janet in welcoming you here. The CPD is a nonpartisan private organization. We get no money from the political parties. We get no money from candidates. We get no money from the government, whether it's state, local, or federal government. We're privately funded. And we're funded by a number of corporations, foundations, and individuals who firmly believe that those who would be president and vice president of the United States should debate so that the American people sitting at home, watching on television or streaming on their other devices can make an assertion as to who they're going to support, where they hear the issues discussed that are going to be important. And I want to just take a moment and mention the sponsors for these 2016 debates. The Anheuser-Busch companies, who do a great job for us every year, the Howard G. Buffett Foundation, the Kovler Fund, the law firm of Kroll and Mooring, the National Governors Association, and the AARP. Won't you join me and give them a hand for their support? Now, I'm just going to mention two other things that we do other than these debates every 4 years. We have been involved for the last 4 years in something that most of us in this audience, other than the students who are here, don't know a lot about. Most of us, as I look around this audience, we grew up reading newspapers and magazines and watching the television news to find out what's going on in the world, what's going on in politics. That's not the way it is today for millions and millions, particularly of young Americans, because social media has changed everything. And so for the last 4 years, we've been working with, very closely, the social media platforms in this country to make sure we understand what those people who on social media are interested in. What are their concerns? What questions do they think ought to be asked? And those platforms are helping us tonight and throughout these debates by letting the moderators, who, as Mike said, are the only people who know what questions are going to be asked, what's on the minds of those people. So, and we're very, very involved with them. We're very thankful for them, because the important thing is to get every American possible educated about the candidates and the issues and get them out to vote on Election Day. And the last thing I'm going to mention is something else we do between the debates, and that's our international program. The United States of America and our system of democracy is a beacon throughout the world. We're not perfect. We never say we are perfect. But to particularly emerging democracies around the world, they look to our system, and they are fascinated by this concept of having debates between the leaders. In the last 20 years, we've been working in 35 nations around the world. We've brought some of them to Washington. Sometimes we send people there where they are now having these types of debates. And in fact, in a couple of weeks in Nevada at UNLV, the final debate, we will have 50 people from 45 nations there for a 3-day seminar. They'll participate and they'll watch the debates. So we're extremely proud of that program. And as Mike said, I'll tell you something else we're extremely proud of, and it's this university. It has done a remarkable job. We owe a debt of gratitude to the students, to the faculty, to all the workers and people who work so hard setting up the chairs that you're sitting on. They did a remarkable job. And they're very, very fortunate because they have a remarkable leader. It's my pleasure to introduce the president of Longwood University, Taylor Rivian. He's a little taller than me.
Frank, Mike, Janet, thank you. Longwood has definitely been in absolute majestic, full cry, getting ready for this great occasion tonight. And we are deeply honored to welcome Elaine Keano, Mike Pence, Tim Kaine, and it should perhaps be no surprise to be welcoming a Virginian in this race. Through all the years, no other state has had more leading figures hold the nation's highest 2 offices than Virginia. Virginia Virginia, of course, is a crossroads of American history. And Farmville, in fact, specifically, is a crossroads of American history. The Civil War drew to a close here in its final week. In a profound concurrence, this is where the civil rights movement took its first powerful strides with the 1951 student-led strike led by then 16-year-old Barbara Johns at Moton that produced the majority of plaintiffs in Brown v. Board of Education. This crossroads of history is a place where leadership has been forged in reconciliation. Next month, Americans go to the polls for the 58th presidential election in the nation's history. Naturally, next month marks the first presidential election for almost all of our students. The Commission on Presidential Debates believes deeply in the connection between education and democracy, believes deeply that holding these crucial events in the heat and crux of each presidential election cycle, these debates, holding these debates on college campuses teaches the habits of democracy. And it is with that thought foremost in mind that I would like to say thank you so deeply to the Commission for your trust in us. Thank you to the General Assembly, Governor McAuliffe, the Virginia Congressional Delegation. Thank you to Prince Edward County, to Farmville, to our devoted donors. Thank you to the thousands who have worked so hard in so many roles to make tonight happen. And thank you with all my heart, absolutely all my heart, to that core cohort here at Longwood. You have given your utmost month after month to produce this grand culmination in the first semester of the school year in this pageant of democracy. And I will close with this thought. Our board and our faculty have always believed that tonight, this debate, is an opportunity our students will cherish always. Maybe even more in time to come than they know even now. We are one of America's 25 oldest public universities. Our mission through the centuries and today is to educate citizen leaders. A high hope of this great occasion tonight as well. Welcome to Longwood, and thank you all.
Hall, campus at Longwood University in Collinsville, Virginia. Just minutes from now, Vice Presidential nominees Mike Pence and Tim Kaine will square off on the stage, making their case for why their party's ticket when you want it. Good evening, Mr. President.
Hi, my name is Kelly. For just 35 days today, millions of Americans will go to the polls to cast their votes. I expect it. Tonight, they're running it.
The two wives of the vice presidential candidate.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to join me in welcoming Mrs. Ann Holton and Mrs. Karen Pence. Thank you so much. Good evening, ladies. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator for this evening's debate, Elaine Quijano, anchor of CBSN and CBS News correspondent.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano of CBS News, and I am honored and humbled to be with you here tonight. Thanks for coming. Now, we have a lot of business to get to, a lot of issues to cover, so I would ask for your help. If everyone could right now, please check to make sure that your cell phones are off. I'll give you a moment to do that. And while you're doing that, I would remind you that there is to be no cheering, no booing, no noise of any kind as the debate gets underway. And with that, I am going to take my seat, get situated. Once again, thank you all for being here.
Potentially to shine, but the stakes of them are really low. Good point. Anderson, let's go back to you.
This is going to be a policy-heavy debate that is going to be rather on the books. But again, this is an opportunity for each candidate to have time on the national stage and kind of react to the past news week.
Especially given they have opportunities to score points in what is a fast-moving campaign, but also they're going to have their eye on the future of their own political career. Somebody's going to lose, and somebody's going to make it in the White House and be a heartbeat away from the presidency. And actually, that's just worth focusing on for just a minute, because the stakes are real here tonight. We've got two of the oldest candidates for office in a long time, and so whoever wins is going to one of these men is going to be a heartbeat away from the presidency. So we ought to be taking a hard look at them.
And we hope people will watch. I mean, I know your friend and colleague, not mine tonight, I will say, Matt Dowd, was saying earlier that he thinks people are going to stop watching after the first 10 or 15 minutes, and we hope that's not the case. We hope that you stay with us, because there's going to be a lot covered in the debate, and we're going to be back here on the back end, too, to do any kind of fact-checking and spin room coverage that we can. If you're watching us on Facebook, and I see a lot of folks are sending in a lot of comments about your feelings, it's good, we encourage that. But send in questions and comments if you see something during the debate and you want to get it fact-checked. All kinds of feelings.
Really?
Yeah.
Things that you can't repeat?
I'm very curious about these feelings you talk of.
A lot of I can't say that word.
Really? It's like that.
A few of them, yes. But there's some people also in here saying that they hope people will listen, that they hope people will just pay attention and take away the lessons that they can from whatever the candidates say tonight. We hope so too.
Look, we do have an opportunity here in what has been a very interesting but also raucous and at some points, for many people, disturbing race.
Yes.
On both sides of the aisle. We do have a moment here to really have a serious discussion of the issues.
Yeah.
Which I think there will be millions of Americans, if that comes to pass, who will find that very satisfying.
Yeah, and I hope everyone watches past the first 10 or 15 minutes, if for no other reason than to prove Matt Dowd wrong.
Well, I
Which is totally right.
I think, if you're interested in playing a game at home and you don't want to do the taxes or email game, there's also the eyebrow game.
What?
Yes.
Yes.
Tell
Tim
me
Kaine has a habit of raising his left eyebrow. Yeah, like this. Yes. As he talks.
Dun, dun, dun.
In fact, in 2006, he gave the Democratic response to Bush's first State of the Union, or State of the Union that year, and people mocked the way that he continued to raise his eyebrow during his rebuttal to President Bush's speech. So much so that it overshadowed whatever the heck he was saying. So he still raises the eyebrow, because I checked. So we could actually do the eyebrow game as well.
So I think we have to decide which game we, as a team. Dan's like, I'm not.
Yeah, I don't even drink, so I'm a terrible participant in this game.
Just for kicks.
We're not drinking. This
What
is
are we
water.
going to track tonight?
Water, people.
LZ Grandison, what are we tracking tonight here in the room?
I think we should
I'm
track
writing
the
it down.
phrase "the American people."
That's a good one.
That's a good one. I'm writing. Okay.
Taxes.
Emails. I've been disappointed with the Benghazi count. I would have thought it'd been much higher.
Well, that was a lot of people thought that was a failure on Donald Trump's part for not bringing it up last time.
Right.
He had somebody in the audience who I believe was the brother of somebody who went down in Benghazi. I think I'm going to stand by the prediction I made when we began tonight, which is that I actually think there's a chance for this to be much more interesting to many more people than a lot of people are predicting.
Yeah.
Because again, the rap on these guys is, as we said earlier, that they're a pair of sitcom dads who are vanilla.
Which show? Give us a show.
8 is enough.
Still can't
8 is
give
enough.
us
8 is enough.
8 is enough.
Yeah, not bad. Okay.
Not bad.
Right.
It checks out. I'm sorry, it just checks out.
It checks out.
It's a real show
It's on
for the
his
dad.
little card that has all the.
I got
Can you
fact
give us
check
the
looking
numbers?
great.
Yeah.
These guys have, Tim Kaine called himself boring, so they have been kind of lowering expectations, and it's very hard. They're lowering expectations not in a political sense, but in a sort of an entertainment sense, and it's going to be very hard to compete on an entertainment level. What we saw in that first presidential debate, and yet I believe that it is possible that we're going to have some very interesting moments tonight, if only because, again, as we've discussed, Mike Pence has got to feel, given the widespread public impression that his boss lost the first debate, that he does have to come out and make a little noise.
Does he break something off in Spanish?
Ooh. Yeah.
Does he what?
Does Kaine break something off in
what's the
Spanish?
prediction
That'll be the
on
finisher
how
drink
long?
of the games, you know?
Yeah.
How long it takes before he drops some Spanish?
I think.
Walt, do you have any numbers on that?
What does 538 have to say about this?
He breaks it out quite a bit. And again, it's a crucial demographic area. Again, a lot of the undecided voters are whites, but again, not all of them. It's a very interesting year when you kind of look at who people are trying to reach out to. Florida is an extremely tight race, right? Donald Trump needs Florida to win. When we looked at all the simulations that we did, 19% of the time, Florida decided the presidential election. So if you are trying to reach voters with again, who speak Spanish and are affiliated with all these communities that are kind of in question of whether or not they're going to support either of these parties, that's a huge thing. And especially in this kind of race, when you look at the states that are going to be most consequential in this election, and you look at the states that are do or die for Pence, for Kaine, and of course their bosses, Florida's huge when it comes to that. So it would not shock me if we had a couple times.
Spanish in the first 5 minutes.
You know what I do want to point out on that, though? This is something that doesn't get talked about enough, is that, yes, there's like something like 28 million eligible Hispanic voters in November, and I think Hispanic millennials make up nearly half of that. The vast majority of them do not speak Spanish as their primary language and really don't care in polls whether or not the candidate speaks Spanish. So, you know, they can keep doing it all they want. I'm not sure how much it's resonating. Hey, quickly, before the debate starts, the top issues on Facebook so far: taxes, healthcare, and government ethics. So we will see if those come up. Do you think they will?
Certainly taxes will come up, given the news of the last week.
As well as government ethics, for sure, because that's basically emails. Right?
All right, guys, here we are, seconds away from the debate, the vice presidential debate in Farmville, Virginia. Two men who've never met before going face to face. Here it is.
Good evening from Longwood University in Farmville, Virginia, and welcome to the first and only vice presidential debate of 2016, sponsored by the Commission on Presidential Debates. I'm Elaine Quijano, anchor at CBSN and correspondent for CBS News. It's an honor to moderate this debate between Senator Tim Kaine and Governor Mike Pence. Both are longtime public servants who are also proud fathers of sons serving in the U.S. Marines. The campaigns have agreed to the rules of this 90-minute debate. There will be 9 different segments covering domestic and foreign policy issues. Each segment will begin with a question to both candidates, who will each have 2 minutes to answer. Then I'll ask follow-up questions to facilitate a discussion between the candidates. By coin toss, it's been determined that Senator Kaine will be first to answer the opening question. We have an enthusiastic audience tonight. They've agreed to only express that enthusiasm once at the end of the debate, and right now, as we welcome Governor Mike Pence and Senator Tim Kaine.
Thank you. An honor. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Great to meet you. Thank you.
Gentlemen, welcome. It truly is a privilege to be with both of you tonight. I'd like to start with the topic of presidential leadership. 28 years ago, tomorrow night, Lloyd Bentsen said the vice presidential debate was not about the qualifications for the vice presidency, but about how, if tragedy should occur, the vice president has to step in without any margin for error, without time for preparation, to take over the responsibility for the biggest job in the world. What about your qualities, your skills, and your temperament equip you to step into that role at a moment's notice? Senator Kaine.
Elaine, thank you for being here tonight. And Governor Pence, welcome. It is so great to be back at Longwood University in Farmville, Virginia. This is a very special place. 65 years ago, a young, courageous woman, Barbara Johns, led a walkout of her high school, Moton High School. She made history by protesting school segregation. She believed our nation was stronger together, and that walkout led to the Brown versus Board of Education decision that moved us down the path toward equality. I am so proud to be running with another strong, history-making woman, Hillary Clinton, to be president of the United States. I'm proud because her vision of stronger together, building an economy that works for all, not just those at the top, being safe in the world, not only with a strong military, but also strong alliances to battle terrorism and climate change, and also to build a community of respect, just like Barbara Johns tried to do 65 years ago. That's why I'm so proud to be her running mate. Hillary told me why she asked me to be her running mate. She said, the test of a Clinton administration will not be the signing of a bill or the passage of a bill. It'll be whether we can make somebody's life better, whether we can make a classroom better learning environment for school kids or teachers, whether we can make us safer. It's going to be about results. And she said to me, you've been a missionary and a civil rights lawyer. You've been a city councilman and mayor. You've been a lieutenant governor and now a U.S. senator. I think you will help me figure out how to govern this nation so that we always keep in mind that the success of the administration is the difference we make in people's lives. And that's what I bring to the ticket, that experience having served at all levels of government. But my primary role is to be Hillary Clinton's right-hand person and strong supporter as she puts together the most historic administration possible. And I relish that role. I'm so proud of her. I'll just say this. We trust Hillary Clinton, my wife and I, and we trust her with the most important thing in our life. We have a son deployed overseas in the Marine Corps right now. We trust Hillary Clinton as President and Commander-in-Chief, but the thought of Donald Trump as Commander-in-Chief scares us to death.
Governor Pence.
Well, first off, thank you, Elaine, and thank you to Norwood University for their wonderful hospitality. The Commission on Presidential Debates is deeply humbling for me to be here. To be surrounded by my wonderful family, and Senator Kaine, it's an honor to be here with you as well. And I also want to say thanks to everyone that's looking in tonight, who understands what an enormously important time this is in the life of our nation. For the last 7.5 years, we've seen America's place in the world weakened. We've seen an economy stifled by more taxes, more regulation, a war on coal, and a failing health care reform come to be known as Obamacare. And the American people know that we need to make a change. And so I want to thank all of you for being with us tonight. I also want to thank Donald Trump for making that call and inviting us to be a part of this ticket. I have to tell you, I'm a small town boy from a place not too different from Farmville. I grew up with a cornfield in my backyard. My grandfather had immigrated to this country when he was about my son's age. My mom and dad built everything that matters in a small town in southern Indiana. They built a family and a good name and a business, and they raised a family. And I dreamed someday of representing my hometown in Washington, D.C., but honestly, Elaine, I never imagined I'd have the opportunity to be governor of the state that I love, let alone be sitting at a table like this in this kind of a position. So to answer your question, I would say I would hope that if the responsibility ever fell to me in this role, that I would meet it with the way that I'm going to meet the responsibility should I be elected Vice President of the United States. And that's to bring a lifetime of experience, a lifetime growing up in a small town, a lifetime where I've served in the Congress of the United States, where I've led a state that works in the great state of Indiana. And whatever other responsibilities might follow from this, I would hope and frankly I would pray to be able to meet that moment with that lifetime of experience.
Senator Kaine, on the campaign trail, you praise Secretary Clinton's character, including her commitment to public service. Yet 60% of voters don't think she's trustworthy. Why do so many people distrust her? Is it because they have questions about her emails and the Clinton Foundation?
Elaine, let me tell you why I trust Hillary Clinton. Here's what people should look at as they look at a public servant. Do they have a passion in their life that showed up before they were in public life? And have they held on to that passion throughout their life, regardless of whether they were in office or not, succeeding or failing? Hillary Clinton has that passion. From a time as a kid in a Methodist youth group in the suburbs of Chicago, she has been focused on serving others with a special focus on empowering families and kids. As a civil rights lawyer in the South with the Children's Defense Fund, First Lady of Arkansas and this country's Senator, Secretary of State, it's always been about putting others first. And that's a sharp contrast with Donald Trump. Donald Trump always puts himself first. He built a business career, in the words of one of his own campaign staffers, off the backs of the little guy. And as a candidate, he started his campaign with a speech where he called Mexicans rapists and criminals, and he has pursued the discredited and really outrageous lie that President Obama wasn't born in the United States. It is so painful to suggest that we go back to think about these days where an African American could not be a citizen of the United States. And I can't imagine how Governor Pence can defend the insult-driven, selfish, me-first style of Donald Trump.
Governor Pence, let me ask you, you have said Donald Trump is, quote, thoughtful, compassionate, and steady. Yet 67% of voters feel he is a risky choice, and 65% feel he does not have the right kind of temperament to be president. Why do so many Americans think Mr. Trump is simply too erratic?
Well, let me say first and foremost that Senator, you and Hillary Clinton would know a lot about an insult-driven campaign. It really is remarkable. At a time when literally, in the wake of Hillary Clinton's tenure as Secretary of State, where she was the architect of the Obama administration's foreign policy, we see entire portions of the world, particularly the wider Middle East, literally spinning out of control. I mean, the situation we're watching hour by hour in Syria today is a result of the failed foreign policy and the weak foreign policy that Hillary Clinton helped lead in this administration and create. The newly emboldened the aggression of Russia, whether it was in Ukraine or now their heavy-handed approach. Their heavy-handed approach.
You both have said Vladimir Putin is a better
Gentlemen, we're going to get to
president.
Russia in just a moment, but I do want to get back to the
But
question.
in the midst, yeah, Elaine, thank you, thank you, Senator.
These guys have praised Vladimir Putin as a
Yes,
great
and
leader.
we will
How
get
can
to
they
that,
defend
Senator.
that?
We do have that coming up here. But in the meantime, the questions were
Senator, I
about
must have
your
hit
running mates.
I must have hit a nerve here
Why the
because
disconnect?
at a time of great challenge in the life of this nation, where we've weakened America's place in the world, stifled America's economy, the campaign of Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine has been an avalanche of insults. Look, to get to your question about trustworthiness, Donald Trump has built a business through hard times and through good times. He's brought an extraordinary business acumen. He's employed tens of thousands of people in this country
and paid a few taxes and lost $1 billion a year.
But why the disconnect with your running mates?
But there's a reason why people question the trustworthiness of Hillary Clinton, and that's because they're paying attention. I mean, the reality is when she was Secretary of State, Senator, come on. She had a Clinton Foundation accepting contributions from foreign governments.
You are Donald Trump's apprentice. Let me talk about this
Senator,
issue.
I think I'm still on my time.
Well, I think isn't this a discussion?
This is our open discussion.
Senator,
Let's talk about the state of the world.
Let me interrupt you and finish my sentence if I can. The Clinton Foundation accepted foreign contributions from foreign governments and foreign donors while she was Secretary of State.
Now I can weigh.
She had a private server.
I get to weigh in.
That was discovered.
Which I did raise.
To keep that pay-to-play process
you have an opportunity
out of the reach of the
Governor
public.
Pence doesn't think the world's going so well, and he, is going to say it's everybody's fault.
Do you?
Let me tell you this: when Hillary Clinton became Secretary of State, Governor Pence, do you know that Osama bin Laden was alive?
Yes.
Do you know that we had 175,000 troops deployed in the battlefield in Iraq and Afghanistan? Do you know that Iran was racing toward a nuclear weapon and Russia was expanding its stockpile? Under Secretary Clinton's leadership, she was part of the national team, public safety team, that went after and revived the dormant hunt against bin Laden and wiped him off the face of the earth. She worked to deal with the Russians to reduce their chemical weapons stockpile. She worked a tough negotiation with nations around the world to eliminate the Iranian nuclear weapons program without firing a shot.
Eliminate the Iranian nuclear weapons
Absolutely,
program.
without firing a shot. And instead of 175,000 American troops deployed overseas, we now have 15,000.
Right, and
these are very, very.
And Iraq has been overrun by ISIS because Hillary Clinton failed to renegotiate.
More American troops in Iraq, you can propose that.
Hillary Clinton failed to renegotiate a status of forces agreement.
No, that is incorrect.
And so we removed all of our troops from Iraq, and ISIS was able to be conjured up in that vacuum
but I'd like to
and overrun vast areas of Iraq.
President Bush said we would leave Iraq at the end of 2011. And Elaine, Iraq didn't want our troops to stay, and they wouldn't give us the protection for our troops. And guess what? If a nation where our troops are serving does not want us to stay, we're not going to stay without them being protected.
It was a failure of the Secretary of State.
If Governor Pence wants to put more troops back in Iraq,
there are a lot of people wondering in this country about the economy.
Right.
Let's turn to the issue of the economy. According to the Nonpartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, neither of your economic plans will reduce the growing $19 trillion gross national debt. In fact, your plans would add even more to it. Both of you were governors who balanced state budgets. Are you concerned that adding more to the debt could be disastrous for the country? Governor Pence.
I think the fact that under this past administration, of which Hillary Clinton was a part, we've almost doubled the national debt, is atrocious. I mean, I'm very proud of the fact that I come from a state that works. The state of Indiana has balanced budgets. We cut taxes. We made record investments in education and in infrastructure. And I still finished my term with $2 billion in the bank. That's a little bit different than when Senator Kaine was governor here in Virginia. He actually tried to raise taxes by about $4 billion. He left his state about $2 billion in the hole. The state of Indiana, we've cut unemployment in half, unemployment doubled when he was governor. But I think he's a very fitting running mate for Hillary Clinton. Because in the wake of a season where American families are struggling in this economy, under the weight of higher taxes and Obamacare and the war on coal and the stifling avalanche of regulation coming out of this administration, Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine want more of the same. It really is remarkable that they actually are advocating $1 trillion in tax increases, which I get that. You tried to raise taxes here in Virginia and were unsuccessful. But $1 trillion in tax increases, more regulation, more of the same war on coal, and more of Obamacare that now even former President Bill Clinton calls Obamacare a crazy plan. But Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine want to build on Obamacare. They want to expand it into a single-payer program. And for all the world, Hillary Clinton just thinks Obamacare is a good start. Look, Donald Trump and I have a plan to get this economy moving again. Just the way that it worked in the 1980s, just the way it worked in the 1960s. And that is by lowering taxes across the board for working families, small businesses, and family farms, ending the war on coal that is hurting jobs and hurting this economy, even here in Virginia, repealing Obamacare, lock, stock, and barrel, and repealing all of the executive orders that Barack Obama has signed that are stifling economic growth in this economy. We can get America moving again. Put on top of that the kind of trade deals that'll put the American worker first, and you've got a prescription for real growth. And when you get the economy growing, Elaine, that's when you can deal with the national debt. When we get back to 3.5% to 4% growth, with Donald Trump's plan will do, then we're going to have the resources to meet our nation's needs at home and abroad, and we're going to have the ability to bring down the national debt.
Senator Kaine.
Elaine, on the economy, there's a fundamental choice for the American electorate. Do you want a you're hired president in Hillary Clinton, or do you want a you're fired president in Donald Trump? I think that's not such a hard choice. Hillary and I have a plan that's on the table that's a you're hired plan. 5 components. First thing we do is we invest in manufacturing, infrastructure, and research in the clean energy jobs of tomorrow. Second thing is we invest in our workforce, from pre-K education to great teachers to debt-free college and tuition-free college for families that make less than $125,000 a year. Third, we promote fairness by raising the minimum wage so you can't work full-time and be under the poverty level, and by paying women equal pay for equal work. Fourth, we promote small business growth, just as we've done in Virginia. To make it easier to start and grow small businesses, Hillary and I each grew up in small business families. My dad, who ran an iron working and welding shop, is here tonight. And fifth, we have a tax plan that targets tax relief to middle-class individuals and small businesses and ask those at the very top who've benefited as we've come out of recession to pay more. The Trump plan is a different plan. It's a you're fired plan, and there's 2 key elements to it. First, Donald Trump said wages are too high. And both Donald Trump and Mike Pence think we ought to eliminate the federal minimum wage. Mike Pence, when he was in Congress, voted against raising the minimum wage above $5.15. And he has been a one-man bulwark against minimum wage increases in Indiana. The second component of the plan is massive tax breaks for the very top. Trillions of dollars of tax breaks for people just like Donald Trump. The problem with this, Elaine, is that's exactly what we did 10 years ago, and it put the economy into the deepest recession since the 1930s. Independent analysts say the Clinton plan would grow the economy by 10.5 million jobs. The Trump plan would cost 3.5 million jobs. And Donald Trump, why would he do this? Because his tax plan basically helps him. And if he ever met his promise, and he gave his tax returns to the American public like he said he would, we would see just how much his economic plan is really a Trump first plan.
On that point, Governor Pence, recently the New York Times released part of Mr. Trump's 1995 tax return and reported that he could have avoided paying federal income taxes for years. Yesterday, Mr. Trump said he brilliantly used the laws to pay as little tax as legally possible. Does that seem fair to you?
Well, first, let me say I appreciated the you're hired, you're fired thing, Senator. You used that a whole lot, and I think your running mate used a lot of pre-done lines. Look, what you all just heard out there is more taxes $2 trillion in more spending, more deficits, more debt, more government. And if you think that's all working, then you look at the other side of the table. I mean, the truth of the matter is the policies of this administration, which Hillary Clinton and Senator Kaine want to continue, have run this economy into a ditch. We're in the slowest economic recovery since the Great Depression.
15 million new jobs.
There are millions more people living in poverty today than the day that Barack Obama, with Hillary Clinton at his side,
and the poverty
stepped
level
into the Oval
and the median
Office.
income
We have the lowest
improved dramatically between 2014 and 2015.
Honestly, Senator, you can roll out the numbers and the sunny side, but I got to tell you, people in Scranton, no different. People in Fort Wayne, Indiana, no different. I mean, this economy is struggling. And the answer to this economy is not more taxes.
But it's not to give away tax relief to the folks at the top.
And so
I am interested to hearing whether he'll defend his running mates not releasing taxes and not paying taxes.
Absolutely, I will.
Governor, with all due respect, the question was about whether it seems fair to you that Mr. Trump said he brilliantly used the laws to pay as little tax as legally possible.
Well, this is probably the difference between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton and Senator Kaine. I mean, Hillary Clinton and Senator Kaine, and God bless you for it, career public servants, that's great. Donald Trump is a businessman, not a career politician. He actually built a business. Those tax returns that came out publicly this week showed that he faced some pretty tough times 20 years ago. But like virtually every other business, including the New York Times not too long ago, he used what's called net operating loss. We have a tax code, Senator, that actually is designed to encourage entrepreneurship.
But why won't he release his tax return?
Well, we're answering the question about the business thing.
I do want to come back on this.
His tax returns that showed he went through a very difficult time, but he used the tax code just the way it's supposed to be used, and he did it brilliantly.
How do you know that? You haven't seen his tax return.
Because he's created a business that's worth billions of dollars today.
How do you know that?
And with regard to paying taxes, this whole riff about not paying taxes and people saying he didn't pay taxes for years, Donald Trump has created tens of thousands of jobs, and he's paid payroll taxes, sales taxes,
Senator, I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to respond, and I have a question on Social Security.
Hillary Clinton is going to raise taxes, and Donald Trump and I are going to cut them.
Donald Trump started this campaign in 2014. He said, if I run for president, I will absolutely release my taxes. He's broken his first promise. Second, he stood on the stage he stood on the stage last week, and when Hillary said you haven't been paying taxes, he said, that makes me smart. So it's smart not to pay for our military. It's smart not to pay for veterans. It's smart not to pay for teachers. And I guess all of us who do pay for those things, I guess we're stupid. And the last thing I'll say
Senator,
is this.
do you take all the deductions that you're entitled to?
The last thing I want to ask Governor Pence is this. Governor Pence had to give Donald Trump his tax returns to show he was qualified to be vice president. Donald Trump must give the American public his tax returns to show that he's qualified to be president, and he's breaking his promise.
Elaine, I have to respond to this.
You get very little time here, 20 seconds.
I'll be very respectful.
Governor.
Look, Donald Trump has filed over 100 pages of financial disclosure, which is what the law requires.
But he said he would release his tax returns. The American people can
review that, and he's going, Senator,
all right,
he's going to release his tax returns when the audit
Social Security.
is over.
Richard Nixon released tax returns when he was under audit.
They're going to raise your taxes.
Gentlemen,
if you can't meet the Nixon standard,
the people at home cannot understand either one of you when you speak over each other. I would please ask you to wait until it is that the other is finished.
All right,
Senator
we're having
Kaine,
fun up here.
On the issue of Social Security, in 18 years, when the Social Security trust funds run out of money, you'll be 76. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget estimates your benefits could be cut by as much as $7,500 per year. What would your administration do to prevent this cut?
First, we're going to protect Social Security, which was one of the greatest programs that the American government has ever done. It happened at a time when you would work your whole life, raising your kids, working, being a little league coach or a Sunday school teacher, and then you would retire into poverty. And Social Security has enabled people to retire with dignity and overwhelmingly not be in poverty. We have to keep it solvent, and we will keep it solvent. And we'll look for strategies like adjusting the payroll tax cap upward in order to do that. Here's what Hillary and I will not do, and I want to make this very plain. We will never, ever engage in a risky scheme to privatize Social Security. Donald Trump wrote a book, and he said Social Security is a Ponzi scheme, and privatization would be good for all of us. And when Congressman Pence was in Congress, he was the chief cheerleader for the privatization of Social Security. Even after President Bush stopped pushing for it, Congressman Pence kept pushing for it. We're going to stand up against efforts to privatize Social Security, and we'll look for ways to keep it solvent going forward, focusing primarily on the payroll tax cap.
Governor Pence will give you an opportunity to respond.
Well, thanks, Elaine. There they go again. Okay. All Donald Trump and I have said about Social Security is we're going to meet our obligations to our seniors. That's it.
Go read the book.
We've said we're going to meet the obligations of Medicare. That's what this campaign is really about, Senator. And I get this is the old scare tactic that they roll out. Scare
but you
the
have
seniors.
a voting record,
and I get all of that. I just look. There's a question that you asked a little bit earlier.
I can't believe
that
you won't defend your own voting record.
I have to go back to. Well, look, you're running with Hillary Clinton, who wants to raise taxes by $1 trillion, increase spending by $2 trillion. And you say you're going to keep the promises of Social Security. Donald Trump and I are going to cut taxes. We're going to
not going to cut taxes. You're going to raise taxes on the middle class. So we can meet the obligations of Social Security and Medicare.
All right.
If we stay on the path that your party has us on, we're going to be in a mountain range of debt, and we're going to face hard choices.
Gentlemen, I want to move on now.
You did ask us a question about debt, and the debt explosion on the Trump plan is much, much bigger than anything on the Clinton side.
All right, let me move on now to the issue of law enforcement and race relations. Law enforcement and race relations. After the Dallas police shooting, Police Chief David Brown said, quote, "We're asking cops to do too much in this country. Every societal failure, we put it off on the cops to solve. Not enough mental health funding, not enough drug addiction funding. Schools fail. Let's give it to the cops." Do we ask too much of police officers in this country? And how would you specifically address the chief's concerns? Senator Kaine.
Elaine, I think that's a very fair comment. I think we put a lot on police shoulders. And this is something I got a lot of scar tissue and experience on. I was a city councilman and mayor in Richmond. And when I came in, we had one of the highest homicide rates in the United States. We fought very, very hard over the course of my time in local office with our police department, and we reduced our homicide rate nearly in half. And then when I was governor of Virginia, we worked hard too. And we did something we had really wanted to do. For the first time ever, we cracked the top 10 safest states because we worked together. Here's what I learned as a mayor and a governor. The way you make communities safer and the way you make police safer is through community policing. You build the bonds between the community and the police force, build bonds of understanding, and then when people feel comfortable in their communities, that gap between the police and the communities they serve narrows. And when that gap narrows, it's safer for the communities and it's safer for the police. That model still works across our country, but there are some other models that don't work. An overly aggressive, more militarized model. Donald Trump recently said we need to do more stop and frisk around the country. That would be a big mistake because it polarizes the relationship between the police and the community. So here's what we'll do. We'll focus on community policing. We will focus on, and Hillary Clinton has rolled out a really comprehensive mental health reform package that she worked on with law enforcement professionals. And we will also fight the scourge of gun violence in the United States. I'm a gun owner. I'm a strong Second Amendment supporter. But I got a lot of scar tissue because when I was governor of Virginia, there was a horrible shooting at Virginia Tech. And we learned that through that painful situation, that gaps in the background record check system should have been closed and it could have prevented that crime. And so we're going to work to do things like close background record checks. And if we do, we won't have the tragedies that we did. One of those killed at Virginia Tech was a guy named Liviu Librescu. He was a 70-plus-year-old Romanian Holocaust survivor. He'd survived the Holocaust. Then he survived the Soviet Union takeover of his country. But then he was a visiting professor at Virginia Tech, and he couldn't survive the scourge of gun violence. We can support the Second Amendment and do things like background record checks and make us safer, and that'll make police safer too.
Governor Pence.
You know, my uncle was a cop, a career cop, on the beat in downtown Chicago. He was my hero when I was growing up. When we go up to visit my dad's family in Chicago, my three brothers and I would marvel at my uncle when he would come out in his uniform, sidearm at his side. Police officers are the best of us. I mean, men and women, white, African American, Asian, Latino, Hispanic, they put their lives on the line every single day. And let me say, at the risk of agreeing with you, community policing is a great. It's worked in the Hoosier State, and we fully support that. Donald Trump and I are going to make sure that law enforcement have the resources and the tools to be able to really restore law and order to the cities and communities of this nation. It's probably why the 330,000 members of the Fraternal Order Police endorsed Donald Trump as the next president of the United States of America, because they see his commitment to them. They see his commitment to law and order. But they also hear the bad-mouthing that comes from people that seize upon tragedy in the wake of police action shootings as a reason to use a broad brush to accuse law enforcement of implicit bias or institutional racism, and that really has got to stop. I mean, when an African-American police officer in Charlotte named Brentley Vinson, an all-star football player who went to Liberty University here in the state, came home, followed his dad into law enforcement, joined the force in Charlotte in 2014, was involved in a police action shooting that claimed the life of Keith Lamont Scott. It was a tragedy. I mean, we mourn with those who mourn. We grieve with those who grieve. We're saddened at the loss of life. But Hillary Clinton actually referred to that moment as an example of implicit bias in the police force, where she used, when she was asked in the debate a week ago whether there was implicit bias in law enforcement, her only answer was that there's implicit bias in everyone in the United States. I just think what we ought to do is we ought to stop seizing on these moments of tragedy. We ought to assure the public that we'll have a full and complete and transparent investigation whenever there's a loss of life because of police action. But Senator, please, enough of this seeking every opportunity to demean law enforcement broadly by making the accusation of implicit bias every time tragedy occurs.
Elaine, people shouldn't be afraid to bring up issues of bias in law enforcement. And if you're afraid to have if you're afraid to have the discussion, you'll never solve it. And so here's an example, heartbreaking. We would agree this is a heartbreaking example. The guy Philando Castile, who was killed in St. Paul, he was a worker, a valued worker in a local school. And he was killed for no apparent reason in an incident that will be discussed and will be investigated. But when folks went and explored this situation, what they found is that Philando Castile, who was they called him Mr. Rogers with dreadlocks in the school that he worked. The kids loved him. That he had been stopped by police 40 or 50 times before that fatal incident. And if you look at sentencing in this country, African Americans and Latinos get sentenced for the same crimes at very different rates.
We need criminal justice reform. Indiana has passed criminal justice
But I just
reform.
want to say, those who say we should not be able to bring up and talk about bias in the system will never solve the problem.
When an African American police officer is involved in a police action shooting involving an African American, why would Hillary Clinton accuse that African American police officer of implicit bias?
I guess I can't believe you are defending the position that there is no bias and it's a topic.
Governor Pence, I have a question on that point.
I did not make that statement.
Your fellow Republican, Governor Pence, Senator Tim Scott, who is African American, recently spoke on the Senate floor. He said he was stopped 7 times by law enforcement in 1 year.
A U.S.
He
Senator.
said, I have felt the anger, the frustration, the sadness, and the humiliation that comes with feeling like you're being targeted for nothing more than being just yourself. What would you say to Senator Scott about his experiences?
Well, I have the deepest respect for Senator Scott, and he's a close friend. And what I would say is that we need to adopt criminal justice reform nationally. I signed criminal justice reform in the state of Indiana, Senator, and we're very proud of it. I worked when I was in Congress on the Second Chance Act. We have got to do a better job recognizing and correcting the errors in the system that do reflect an institutional bias in criminal justice. But what Donald Trump and I are saying is, let's not have the reflex of assuming the worst of men and women in law enforcement. We truly do believe that law enforcement is not a force for racism or division in our country.
Scott, Governor?
Law enforcement in this country is a force for good. They are They truly are people that put their lives on the line every single day. But I would suggest to you, what we need to do is assert a stronger leadership at the national level to support law enforcement. You just heard Senator Kaine reject a stop and frisk. Well, I would suggest to you that the families that live in our inner cities that are besieged by crime.
Elaine,
What would you tell Senator Scott?
If I could jump, but I've heard Senator Scott make that eloquent plea, and look, criminal justice is about respecting the law and being respected by the law. So there is a fundamental respect issue here, and I just want to talk about the tone that's set from the top. Donald Trump during this campaign has called Mexicans rapists and criminals. He's called women slobs, pigs, dogs, disgusting. I don't like saying that in front of my wife and my mother. He attacked an Indiana-born federal judge and said he was unqualified to hear a federal lawsuit because his parents were Mexican. He went after John McCain, a POW, and said he wasn't a hero because he'd been captured. He said African Americans are living in hell, and he perpetrated this outrageous and bigoted lie that President Obama is not a U.S. citizen. If you want to have a society where people are respected and respect laws, you can't have somebody at the top who demeans every group that he talks about. And I cannot believe that Governor Pence will defend the insult-driven campaign that Donald Trump has run.
All right, I want to turn to our next segment now, immigration. Your running mates have both said that undocumented immigrants who have committed violent crimes should be deported. What would you tell the millions of undocumented immigrants who have not committed violent crimes? Governor Pence.
Well, Donald Trump's laid out a plan to end illegal immigration once and for all in this country. We've been talking it to death for 20 years. Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine want to continue the policies of open borders, amnesty, catch and release, sanctuary cities, all the things that are driving wages down in this country, Senator, and also too often with criminal aliens in the country, it's bringing heartbreak. But Donald Trump has a plan that he laid out in Arizona that will deal systematically with illegal immigration, beginning with border security, internal enforcement. It's probably why, for the first time in the history of Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, their union actually endorsed Donald Trump as the next president of the United States, because they know they need help to enforce the laws of this country. And Donald Trump has laid out a priority to remove criminal aliens, remove people that have overstayed their visas. And once we have accomplished all of that, which will strengthen our economy, strengthen the rule of law in the country, and make our communities safer once the criminal aliens are out, then we'll deal with those that remain. But I have to tell you, I was listening to the avalanche of insults coming out of Senator Kaine a minute ago.
These were Donald.
He says,
hold on a second.
It's my time, Senator.
It is, in fact, the governor's time.
I apologize. This is your 2 minutes.
Thanks. I forgive you. He says ours is an insult-driven campaign. Did you all just hear that? Ours is an insult-driven campaign. I mean, to be honest with you, if Donald Trump had said all the things that you said he said in the way you said he said them, he still wouldn't have a fraction of the insults that Hillary Clinton leveled when she said that half of our supporters were a basket of deplorables. She said they were irredeemable. They were not America. I mean, it's extraordinary. And then she laid one after another ism on millions of Americans who believe that we can have a stronger America at home and abroad, who believe we can get this economy moving again, who believe that we can end illegal immigration once and for all. So, Senator, this insult-driven campaign, I mean, that's small potatoes compared to Hillary Clinton calling half of Donald Trump's supporters a basket of deplorables.
Hillary Clinton said something on the campaign trail, and the very next day she said, you know what, I shouldn't have said that.
She said she shouldn't have said half.
Governor, this is Senator Kaine's 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, that's right. So now we're even.
Yeah.
Look for Donald Trump apologizing to John McCain for saying he wasn't a hero. Did Donald Trump apologize for calling women slobs, pigs, dogs, disgusting?
She apologized for saying...
Governor, it is his 2 minutes, please.
Did Donald Trump apologize for taking after somebody in a Twitter war and making fun of her weight? Did he apologize for saying African Americans are living in hell? Did he apologize for saying President Obama was not even a citizen of the United States? You will look in vain to see Donald Trump ever taking responsibility for anybody and apologizing. Immigration. There's 2 plans on the table. Hillary and I believe in comprehensive immigration reform. Donald Trump believes in deportation nation. You got to pick your choice. Hillary and I want a bipartisan reform that will put keeping families together as the top goal. Second, that will help focus enforcement efforts on those who are violent. Third, that will do more border control. And fourth, that will provide a path to citizenship for those who work hard, pay taxes, play by the rules, and take criminal background record checks. That's our proposal. Donald Trump proposes to deport 16 million people, 11 million who are here without documents. And both Donald Trump and Mike Pence want to get rid of birthright citizenship. So if you're born here, but your parents don't have documents, they want to eliminate that. That's another 4.5 million people. These guys, and Donald Trump has said it, deportation force. They want to go house to house, school to school, business to business, and kick out 16 million people. And I cannot believe that Governor Pence would sit here and defend his running mate's claim that we should create a deportation force so that they'll all be gone.
Senator, we have a deportation force. It's called Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. And the Union for Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, for the first time in their history, endorsed Donald Trump to be the next president of the United States.
So you like the 16 million deportation plan?
Senator, that's nonsense. Look, what you just heard is they have a plan for open borders, amnesty. Our
plan is like Ronald Reagan's plan from 1986.
They call it comprehensive immigration reform on Capitol Hill. We all know the routine. It's amnesty. And you heard one of the last things he mentioned was border security. That's how Washington always plays it.
No,
so
I always say we're going to do this for border security 3 years ago, and Governor Pence was against it.
Governor, Mr.
Ronald
Trump
Reagan
has
said a nation without borders is not a nation. Donald Trump is committed to restoring the borders of this nation,
So, Governor,
securing our
how
nation,
would these millions of
enforcing our laws.
undocumented immigrants leave? Would they be forcibly removed?
Well, I think Donald Trump laid out a series of priorities that doesn't end with border security. It begins with border security. And after we secure the border, not only build a wall, but beneath the ground and in the air, we do internal enforcement. But he said the focus has to be on criminal aliens. We just had a conversation about law enforcement. We just had a conversation about the violence that's besetting our cities. The reality is that there's heartbreak and tragedy that has struck American families because people that came into this country illegally are now involved in criminal enterprise and activity, and we don't have the resources or the will to deport them systematically. Donald Trump has said we're going to move those people out, people who've overstayed their visas. We're going to enforce the law of this country. We're going to strengthen immigrations and customs enforcements with more resources and more personnel to be able to do that. And then Donald Trump has made it clear, once we've done all of those things, that we're going to reform the immigration system that we have where people can come into this country. That's the order that you should do it. Border security, removing criminal aliens, upholding the law, and then, Senator, I'll work with you when you go back to the Senate. I promise you, we'll work with you to reform the immigration system.
I look forward to working together in whatever capacities we serve in, but I just want to make it very, very clear that he's trying to fuzz up what Donald Trump has said. When Donald Trump spoke in Phoenix, he looked the audience in the eye and he said, no, we're building the wall and we're deporting everybody. He said, quote, they will all be gone. They will all be gone. And this is one of these ones where you can just go to the tape on it and see what Donald Trump has said. And to add to it, we are a nation of immigrants. Mike Pence and I both are descended from immigrant families. Some things, maybe weren't said so great about the Irish when they came, but we've done well by absorbing immigrants, and it's made our nation stronger. When Donald Trump says Mexicans are rapists and criminals, Mexican immigrants, when Donald Trump says about your judge, who's your judge? He said that Judge Curiel was unqualified to hear a case because his parents are Mexican. I can't imagine how you can defend that.
Gentlemen, I'd like to shift now to the threat of terrorism. Do you think the world today is a safer or more dangerous place than it was 8 years ago? Has the terrorist threat increased or decreased? Senator Kaine.
The terrorist threat has decreased in some ways because bin Laden is dead. The terrorist threat has decreased in some ways because an Iranian nuclear weapons program has been stopped. The terrorist threat to United States troops has been decreased in some ways because there's not 175,000 in a dangerous part of the world. There's only 15,000, but there are other parts of the world that are challenging. Let me tell you this. To beat terrorism, there's only one candidate who can do it, and it's Hillary Clinton. Remember, Hillary Clinton was the senator from New York on 9/11. She was there at the World Trade Center when they were still searching for victims and survivors. That seared onto her the need to beat terrorism. And she's got a plan to do it. She was part of the national security team that wiped out bin Laden. Here's her plan to defeat ISIL. First, we got to keep taking out their leaders on the battlefield. She was part of the team that got bin Laden, and she'll lead the team that will get Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the head of ISIS. Second, we got to disrupt financing networks. Third, disrupt their ability to recruit on the internet in their safe havens. But fourth, we also have to work with allies to share and surge intelligence. That's the Hillary Clinton plan. She's got the experience to do it. Donald Trump. Donald Trump can't start a Twitter war with Miss Universe without shooting himself in the foot. Donald Trump doesn't have a plan. He said, I have a secret plan. And then he said, I know more than all the generals about ISIL. And then he said, I'm going to call the generals to help me figure out a plan. And finally, he said, I'm going to fire all the generals. He doesn't have a plan. But he does have dangerous ideas. Here's four. He trash talks the military. The military is a disaster. John McCain's no hero. The generals need all to be fired, and I know more than them. He wants to tear up alliances. NATO is obsolete and will only work together with Israel if they pay big league. Third, he loves dictators. He's got kind of a personal Mount Rushmore. Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, Muammar Gaddafi, and Saddam Hussein. And last and most dangerously, Donald Trump believes that the world will be safer if more nations have nuclear weapons. He said Saudi Arabia should get them, Japan should get them, Korea should get them. And when he was confronted with this and told, wait a minute, terrorists could get those. Proliferation could lead to nuclear war. Here's what Donald Trump said, and I quote, "Go ahead, folks, enjoy yourselves." I'd love to hear Governor Pence tell me what's so enjoyable or comical about nuclear war.
Governor Pence.
Did you work on that one a long time? Because that had a lot of really creative lines in it.
Well, I'm going to see if you can defend any of it.
Look, I can defend. I can make it very clear to the American people. After traveling millions of miles as our Secretary of State, after being the architect of the foreign policy of this administration, America is less safe today than it was the day that Barack Obama became president of the United States. It's absolutely inarguable. We've weakened America's place in the world. It's been a combination of factors, but mostly it's been a lack of leadership. I mean, I will give you, and I was in Washington, D.C. on 9/11. I saw the clouds of smoke rise from the Pentagon. I
was in Virginia, where the Pentagon's located.
I know you were. We all lived through that day as a nation. It was heartbreaking. And I want to give this president credit for bringing Osama bin Laden to justice. But the truth is, Osama bin Laden led al-Qaeda. Our primary threat today is ISIS. And because Hillary Clinton failed to renegotiate a status of forces agreement that would have allowed some American combat troops to remain in Iraq and secure the hard-fought gains the American soldier had won by 2009, ISIS was able to be literally conjured up out of the desert, and it's overrun vast areas that the American soldier had won in Operation Iraqi Freedom. My heart breaks for the likes of Lance Corporal Scott Zubowski. He fell in Fallujah in 2005. He fought hard through some of the most difficult days in Operation Iraqi Freedom. And he paid the ultimate sacrifice to defend our freedom and secure that nation. And that nation was secured in 2009. But because Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama failed to provide a status of forces agreement and leave sufficient troops in there, we are back at war. The president just ordered more troops on the ground. We are back at war in Iraq. And Scott Zubowski, whose mom would always come to Memorial Day events in Newcastle, Indiana to see me, and I'd always give her a hug and tell her we're never going to forget her son, and we never will. Scott Zubowski and the sacrifices the American soldier made were squandered in Iraq because this administration created a vacuum in which ISIS was able to grow. And a reference to the Iranian deal that Hillary Clinton initiated, $150 billion
stopping a
to the
nuclear
radical
weapons
mullahs
program
in
without
Iran.
firing a shot.
You didn't stop the nuclear weapons
Yes, we
program.
did.
You
Even the Israeli military says it stopped.
guaranteed that Iran will someday become a nuclear power because there's no limitations once the period of time of the treaty comes off.
Governor Pence, Mr. Trump has proposed extreme vetting of immigrants from parts of the world that export terrorism. But that does not address many of the recent terrorist attacks in the United States, such as the Orlando nightclub massacre and the recent bombings in New York and New Jersey. Those were homegrown, committed by U.S. citizens and legal residents. What specific tools would you use to prevent those kinds of attacks?
Well, I think it's a great question, Elaine. But it really does begin with us reforming our immigration system and putting the interests, particularly the safety and security of the American people first. I mean, Donald Trump has called for extreme vetting for people coming in to this country so that we don't bring people into the United States who are hostile to our Bill of Rights freedoms, who are hostile to the American way of life. But also, Donald Trump and I are committed to suspending the Syrian refugee program and programs and immigration from areas of the world that have been compromised by terrorism. Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine want to increase the Syrian refugee program by 500.
Elaine, I want to tell you about our plan.
Homegrown.
Yeah.
And so, but first, let's make sure we're putting the safety and security of the American people first instead of Hillary Clinton expanding the Syrian
or
refugee
instead of
program.
you violating the Constitution by blocking people based on their national origin rather than on whether they're dangerous.
That's absolutely false.
That's what the Seventh Circuit decided. Here's the difference.
The Seventh Circuit.
We have different views on refugee issues and on immigration. Hillary and I want to do enforcement based on, are people dangerous? These guys say all Mexicans are bad. And with respect to refugees, we want to keep people out if they're dangerous. Donald Trump said keep them out if they're Muslim. Mike Pence put a program in place to keep them out if they're from Syria. And yesterday, an appellate court with 3 Republican judges struck down the Pence plan and said it was discriminatory.
And those judges,
we should focus upon danger, not upon discrimination.
Elaine, to your point, those judges said it was because there wasn't any evidence yet that ISIS had infiltrated the United States. Well, Germany just arrested 3 Syrian refugees who were connected to ISIS.
But they told you there's a right way and a wrong way to do it.
But look, if you're going to be critical of me on that, that's fair game. I will tell you, after 2 Syrian refugees were involved in the attack in Paris that is called Paris's 9/11, as governor of the state of Indiana, I have no higher priority than the safety and security of the people of my state.
But Governor
so you
Pence,
bet I suspended that program.
But Governor Pence,
and I stand by that decision. And if I'm vice president of the United States or Donald Trump is president, we're going to put the safety and security of the American people first.
Can we just be clear? Hillary and I will do immigration enforcement and we'll vet refugees based on whether they're dangerous or not. We won't do it based on discriminating against you from the country you come from or the religion that you practice.
But the problem with that
is completely antithetical to the Jeffersonian values of equality.
Elaine, the director of the FBI or Homeland Security said, we can't know for certain who these people are coming from Syria.
Yes, we can. And when we don't let them know, we don't let them in.
So the
when
FBI,
we don't know who they are, we don't let them in.
The FBI and Homeland Security said, we can't know for certain. You've got to err on the side of the safety and security of the American people, Senator. I understand
by trashing all Syrians or trashing all Muslims.
Senator Kaine, let me ask you this. Secretary Clinton has talked about an intelligence surge.
Yes.
What exactly would an intelligence surge look like, and how would that help identify terrorists with no operational connection to a foreign terrorist organization?
Intelligence surge is 2 things, Elaine. It's 2 things. It's first, dramatically expanding our intelligence capacities by hiring great professionals, but also we've got some of the best intel and cyber employees in the world right here in the United States working for many of our private sector companies. So it involves increasing our own workforce, but striking great partnerships with some of our cyber and intel experts in the private sector so that we can, consistent with constitutional principles, gather more intelligence. But the second piece of this is really, really important. It also means creating stronger alliances because you gather intelligence and then you share your intelligence back and forth with allies. And that's how you find out who may be trying to recruit, who may be trying to come from one country to the next. Alliances are critical. That's why Donald Trump's claim that he wants to, that NATO is obsolete and that we need to get rid of NATO is so dangerous.
It's not his plan.
Well, he said NATO is obsolete. And look, if you push aside your alliances, who are you going to share intelligence with? Hillary Clinton is the Secretary of State who knows how to build alliances. She built the sanctions regime around the world that stopped the Iranian nuclear weapons program. And that's what an intelligence surge means. Better skill and capacity, but also better alliances.
All right, I'd like to turn now to the tragedy in Syria.
Can I speak about the
250,000
cybersecurity surge at all?
You can have 30 seconds, Governor, quickly, please.
First, Donald Trump just spoke about this issue this week. We have got to bring together the best resources of this country to understand that cyber warfare is the new warfare of the asymmetrical enemies that we face in this country. And I look forward, if I'm privileged to be in this role, of working with you in the Senate to make sure that we resource that effort.
We will work together in whatever roles we inhabit.
We have an intelligence serve. But I will also tell you that it's important in this moment to remember that Hillary Clinton had a private server in her home that had classified information on it about drone strikes. Emails from the President of the United States of America were on there. Her private server was subject to being hacked by foreign powers.
I'd like to ask you about Syria.
We could put cybersecurity first if we just make sure the next Secretary of State doesn't have a private server.
A full investigation concluded that not one reasonable prosecutor would take any additional step. You don't get to decide the rights and wrongs of this. We have a justice system that does that. And a Republican FBI director did an investigation and concluded.
All right, we are moving on now.
Senator, if your son or my son handled classified information the way Hillary Clinton did, they'd be court-martialed.
That is absolutely false, and you know that.
Absolutely
and you know
true.
that, Governor.
It's
absolutely true.
Because the FBI did an investigation.
Gentlemen.
And they concluded that there was no reasonable prosecutor who would take it further.
Senator Kaine, Governor Pence, please.
Syria.
I want to turn now to Syria. 250,000 people, 100,000 of them children, are under siege in Aleppo, Syria. Bunker buster bombs, cluster munitions, and incendiary weapons are being dropped on them by Russian and Syrian militaries. Does the U.S. have a responsibility to protect civilians and prevent mass casualties on this scale? Governor Pence.
The United States of America needs to begin to exercise strong leadership to protect the vulnerable citizens and over 100,000 children in Aleppo. Hillary Clinton's top priority when she became Secretary of State was the Russian reset. The Russian reset. After the Russian reset, the Russians invaded Ukraine and took over Crimea. And the small and bullying leader of Russia is now dictating terms to the United States to the point where all the United States of America, the greatest nation on earth, just withdraws from talks about a ceasefire while Vladimir Putin puts a missile defense system in Syria while he marshals the forces and begins. Look, we have got to begin to lean into this with strong, broad-shouldered American leadership. It begins by rebuilding our military. I mean, the Russians and the Chinese have been making enormous investments in the military. We have the smallest Navy since 1916. We have the lowest number of troops since the end of the Second World War. We've got to work with the Congress and Donald Trump will to rebuild our military and project American strength in the world. But about Aleppo and about Syria, I truly do believe that what America ought to do right now is to immediately establish safe zones so that families and vulnerable families with children can move out of those areas, work with our Arab partners real time right now to make that happen. And secondly, I just have to tell you that the provocations by Russia need to be met with American strength. And if Russia chooses to be involved and continue, I should say, to be involved in this barbaric attack on civilians in Aleppo, the United States of America should be prepared to use military force to strike military targets of the Assad regime, to prevent them from this humanitarian crisis that is taking place in Aleppo. There's a broad range of other things that we ought to do as well. We ought to deploy a missile defense shield to the Czech Republic and Poland, which Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama pulled back on out of not wanting to offend the Russians back in 2009. We've just got to have American strength on the world stage. And when Donald Trump becomes president of the United States, the Russians and other countries in the world will know they're dealing with a strong American president.
Senator
Hillary and I also agree that the establishment of a humanitarian zone in northern Syria with the provision of international human aid consistent with the UN Security Council resolution that was passed in February 2014 would be a very, very good idea. And Hillary also has the ability to stand up to Russia in a way that this ticket does not. Donald Trump again and again has praised Vladimir Putin, and it's clear that he has business dealings with Russian oligarchs who are very connected to Putin. The Trump campaign management team had to be fired a month or so ago because of those shadowy connections with pro-Putin forces. Governor Pence made the odd claim. He said, inarguably, Vladimir Putin is a better leader than President Obama. Vladimir Putin's run his economy into the ground. He persecutes LGBT folks and journalists. If you don't know the difference between dictatorship and leadership, then you got to go back to a 5th grade civics class. I tell you what offends me. Governor Pence just said that Donald Trump will rebuild the military. No, he won't. Donald Trump is avoiding paying taxes. The New York Times story, and we need to get this, but the New York Times story suggested that he probably didn't pay taxes for about 18 years starting in 1995. Those years included the years of 9/11. So get this. On 9/11, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump's hometown was attacked by the worst terrorist attack in the history of the United States. Young men and women signed up to serve in the military to fight terrorism. Hillary Clinton went to Washington to get funds to rebuild her city and protect first responders, but Donald Trump was fighting a very different fight. It was a fight to avoid paying taxes so that he wouldn't support the fight against terror. He wouldn't support troops. He wouldn't support. This is important, Elaine. When a guy running for president will not support the troops, not support veterans, not support teachers, that's really important. And I said about Aleppo, we do agree. The notion is we have to create a humanitarian zone in northern Syria. It's very important.
Governor Pence, you had mentioned no-fly zone. Where would you propose setting up a safe zone specifically? How would you keep it safe?
Well, first and foremost, Donald Trump supports our troops. Donald Trump supports our veterans.
He won't pay taxes.
Donald Trump has paid all the taxes that he's... Do you not take deductions?
Gentlemen, this
How
is
does that work?
about Syria. I'd like to ask the
honestly, Senator,
it is about our troops.
I understand why you want to change it. I understand why you want to change the subject. I understand why you want to change the subject. And let me be very clear on this Russian thing. The larger question here...
Do you think Donald Trump is smart to not pay taxes?
What we're dealing with is the, there's an old proverb that says the Russian bear never dies, it just hibernates. And the truth of the matter is the weak and feckless foreign policy of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama has awakened an aggression in Russia that first appeared a few years ago with their move in Georgia, now their move into Crimea, now their move into the wider Middle East. And all the while, all we do is fold our arms and say we're not having talks anymore. To answer your question, we just need American strength. We need to marshal the resources of our allies in the region, and in the immediate, we need to act now to get people out of harm's way.
And exactly how would those safe zones work? How would they remain safe?
The safe zones would have to be, as the senator said, there's already a framework for this that's been recognized by the international community. But the United States of America needs to be prepared to work with our allies in the region to create a route for safe passage, and then to protect people in those areas, including with a no-fly zone. But look, this is very tough stuff. I served on the Foreign Affairs Committee for a decade. I traveled in and out of that region for 10 years. I saw what the American soldier won in Operation Iraqi Freedom, and to see the weak and feckless leadership that Hillary Clinton was the architect of in the foreign policy of the Obama administration.
Let me come back and
is
talk
deeply
about,
troubling to me. That will all
let me
change
talk
the
about
day
the
Donald
things
Trump
that Governor
becomes
Pence
president of the
doesn't want
United
to
States.
acknowledge, Elaine. He doesn't want to acknowledge that we stopped the Iranian nuclear weapons program. He doesn't want to acknowledge that Hillary was part of the team that got bin Laden. He doesn't want to acknowledge that it's a good thing, not a bad thing. That it's a good thing, not a bad thing, that we're down from 175,000 troops deployed overseas to 15,000. But let me tell you what will really make the Middle East dangerous. Donald Trump's idea that more nations should get nuclear weapons. Saudi Arabia, Japan, South Korea. Ronald Reagan said something really interesting about nuclear proliferation back in the 1980s. He said the problem with nuclear proliferation is that some fool or maniac could trigger a catastrophic event. And I think that's who Governor Pence's running mate is, exactly who President Reagan warned us about.
Senator, that was even beneath you and Hillary Clinton, and that's pretty low.
But do you think we should have more nuclear weapons in the world will make us safer?
Senator, Ronald Reagan also said nuclear war should never be fought because it can never be won. And the United States of America needs to make investments in modernizing our nuclear force
But can
for
you
both
defend
deterrence
Donald
and
Trump's claim that more
assurance
nations should get nuclear
to our allies? But let me go back to this Iran thing. I mean, he keeps saying that that Hillary Clinton, who started the deal with the Iranians, prevented Iran from getting a nuclear weapon.
That's what the Israeli head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is saying right now, Governor Pence.
That's not what Israel thinks.
Gadi Eisenkot, you can go check it.
You wouldn't necessarily know that. I know you boycotted Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech.
No, I visited him in his office. I visited him in his office.
You boycotted the speech. The point is, what this so-called Iran deal did was essentially guarantee. I mean, when I was in Congress, I fought hard on a bipartisan basis with Republican and Democrat members to move forward the toughest sanctions, literally in the history of the United States against
Iran. And then Hillary used them.
We were bringing them to heel, but the goal was always that we would only lift the sanctions if Iran permanently renounced their nuclear
Elaine,
ambitions.
let me just mention
they have not. Elaine, let me finish a sentence.
Mm-hmm.
They have not renounced their nuclear ambitions, and when the deal's period runs out, there's no limitation on them obtaining weapons. That
Elaine,
and the fact that they got $1.7 billion in a ransom payment.
We need to talk about Russia very
It's
quickly,
just
though,
astonishing
Senator,
to the American
please.
people.
6 times tonight, I have said to Governor Pence, I can't imagine how you can defend your running mate's position on one issue after the next. And in all 6 cases, he's refused to defend his running mate's.
No, don't put words in my mouth.
All right.
If he's going to do that, you got to give him time.
And yet, he is asking everybody to vote for somebody that he cannot defend. And I just think that should be underlined.
All right, gentlemen, let's talk about
Elaine,
Russia.
I'm very,
this is
very
a topic
happy to
that has come
defend
up.
Donald Trump.
I will
If
give
he
you an
wants to take
opportunity
these one
to
at a
do
time,
that.
I'll take them one at a time.
More nations should get nuclear weapons.
Don't put
try to
words into
defend
my
that.
mouth. Well, he never said that,
All right.
Senator. And
He
you
is
know
absolutely decided.
Gentlemen,
Saudi
most of the
Arabia,
stuff you
South
said, he
Korea,
never
Japan.
said.
Gentlemen, Russia. Russian President Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine, annexed Crimea, and has provided crucial military support to the Assad regime. What steps, if any, would your administration take to counter these actions? Senator Kaine.
You got to be tough on Russia. So let's start with not praising Vladimir Putin as a great leader. Donald Trump and Mike Pence have said he's a great leader. And Donald Trump has, has business dealings with Russia that he refuses to disclose. Hillary Clinton has gone toe-to-toe with Russia. She went toe-to-toe with Russia as Secretary of State to do the New START agreement to reduce Russia's nuclear stockpile. She's had the experience doing it. She went toe-to-toe with Russia and lodged protests when they went into Georgia. And we've done the same thing about Ukraine, but more than lodging protests, we've put punishing economic sanctions on Russia that we need to continue. Donald Trump, on the other hand, didn't know that Russia had invaded the Crimea.
Oh, that's nonsense.
He was on a TV show a couple months back and he said, I'll guarantee you this, Russia's not going into the Ukraine. And he had to be reminded that they had gone into the Crimea 2 years before. Hillary Clinton has gone toe-to-toe with Russia to work out a deal on New START. She got them engaged in a meaningful way to cap Iran's nuclear weapons program, and yet she stood up to them on issues such as Syria and their invasion of Georgia. You've got to have the ability to do that, and Hillary does. On the other hand, in Donald Trump, you have somebody who praises Vladimir Putin all the time. America should really wonder about a President Trump who had a campaign manager with ties to Putin, pro-Putin elements in the Ukraine, who had to be fired for that reason. They should wonder, when Donald Trump is sitting down with Vladimir Putin, is it going to be America's bottom line? Or is it going to be Donald Trump's bottom line that he's going to be worried about with all of his business dealings? Now, this could be solved if Donald Trump would be willing to release his tax returns, as he told the American public that he would do. And I know he's laughing at this, but every president...
What's it got to do with Russia?
Every president since Richard Nixon has done it, and Donald Trump has said, I'm doing business with Russia. The only way the American public will see whether he has a conflict of interest...
No, he hasn't said that.
Senator,
He has,
time is up. Governor.
Well, thanks. Just trying to keep up with the insult-driven campaign on the other side of the table.
You know what? I'm just saying facts about your running mate.
Yeah. Well,
and I know you can't defend
Senator,
him.
please,
I'm happy to defend him, Senator. Don't put words in my mouth that I'm not defending him.
You're not.
I'm happy to defend him. Most of what you said is completely false, and the American people know that.
I'll run through the list of things where you
old days
Senator,
where you
please,
can just
this
say
is Governor
stuff and people
Pence's
believe
2
it.
minutes.
Look, this is the alternative universe of Washington, D.C. versus reality. Hillary Clinton said her number one priority was a reset with Russia. That reset resulted in the invasion of Ukraine. After they'd infiltrated with what are called little green men, Russian soldiers that were dressing up like Ukrainian dissidents, and then they moved all the way into Crimea, took over the Crimean Peninsula. And Donald Trump knew that happened. He basically was saying it's not going to happen again. The truth of the matter is that what you have in the rise of aggressive Russia, which has had increased its influence in Iran, that's now because of this deal is on a pathway in the future to obtain a nuclear. The leading state sponsor of terror in the world in Iran now has a closer working relationship with Russia because of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama's foreign policy, and $150 billion and sanctions all being lifted. And then, of course, Syria. I mean, it really is extraordinary. Syria is imploding. You just asked a very thoughtful question about the disaster in Aleppo. ISIS is headquartered in Raqqa. ISIS from Raqqa has overrun vast areas that at great sacrifice the American soldier won in Operation Iraqi Freedom. And yet, Senator Kaine still sits here, loyal soldier, I get all that, and saying that the foreign policy of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama somehow made the world more secure. I mean, it really is astonishing that on the day that Iran released 4 American hostages, we delivered $400 million in cash as a ransom payment for Americans held by the radical mullahs in Tehran.
And Governor, just today, Mr. Trump said, quote, Putin has no respect for Hillary Clinton and no respect for Obama. Why do you think he'll respect a Trump-Pence administration?
Strength. Plain and simple. Business. Donald Trump, that's nonsense. Donald Trump
Donald Trump's son
leader
says
who is
that the
going
Trump
to lead with American strength. We're going to rebuild our military. And let me say this whole Putin thing. Look, America is stronger than Russia. Our economy is 16 times larger than the Russian economy. America's political system is superior to the crony, corrupt capitalist system in Russia in every way. When Donald Trump and I observe that, as I've said, in Syria, in Iran, in Ukraine, that the small and bullying leader of Russia has been stronger on the world stage than this administration, that's stating painful facts. That's not an endorsement of Vladimir Putin. That's an indictment of the weak and feckless leadership of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama.
Well, this is one where we can just kind of go to the tape on it. But Governor Pence said, inarguably, Vladimir Putin is a better leader than President Obama.
That is absolutely inaccurate.
And I just think a guy
I said
who
he's been stronger on the world stage.
No, you said leader. And I'll just say this, Governor.
You just said better.
If you mistake leadership for dictatorship and you can't tell the difference, a country that's running its economy.
Yeah, here we go. This is the great school thing again. Right.
If you can't tell the difference, you shouldn't be commander in chief.
Yeah.
And with Donald Trump's sons say that they have all these business dealings with Russia. Those could be disclosed with tax returns, but they refuse to do them. Americans need to worry about whether Donald Trump will be watching out for America's bottom line or his own bottom line.
Senator Kaine, what went wrong with the Russia reset?
Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin is a dictator.
And what would you do differently?
Vladimir Putin is a dictator. He's not a leader. Anybody who thinks otherwise doesn't know Russian history and they don't know Vladimir Putin. Hillary Clinton knows exactly who this guy is. John McCain said, I look at his eyes and I see KGB, and Hillary kind of has that same feeling. So how do you deal with them? We do have to deal with Russia in a lot of different ways. There are areas where we can cooperate. So it was Hillary Clinton who worked with Russia on the New START treaty to reduce their nuclear weapons stockpile. It was Hillary Clinton that worked with Russia to get them engaged in a community of nations to stop the Iranian nuclear weapons program without firing a shot. She's not going around praising Vladimir Putin as a great guy, but she knows how to sit down at a table and negotiate tough deals. This is a very challenging part of the world, and we ought to have a commander-in-chief who has prepared and done it, rather than somebody who goes around praising Vladimir Putin as a great leader.
All right, I'd like to ask now about North Korea, Iran, and the threat of nuclear weapons. North Korea recently conducted its 5th and most powerful nuclear test.
Right.
What specific steps would you take to prevent North Korea from developing a nuclear-armed missile capable of reaching the United States? Governor Pence.
Well, first, we need to make a commitment to rebuild our military, including modernizing our nuclear forces. And we also need an effective American diplomacy that will marshal the resources of nations in the Asian Pacific Rim to put pressure on North Korea, on Kim Jong-un, to abandon his nuclear ambitions. It has to remain the policy of the United States of America, the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, plain and simple. And when Donald Trump is president of the United States, we're not going to have the kind of posture in the world that has Russia invading Crimea and Ukraine, that has the Chinese building new islands in the South China Sea, that has literally the world, including North Korea, flouting American power. We're going to go back to the days of peace through strength. But I have to tell you that all this talk about tax returns, and I get it, you want to keep bringing that up. It must have
until
played well in some focus group. But here, Hillary Clinton and her husband set up a private foundation called the Clinton Foundation. While she was Secretary of State, the Clinton Foundation accepted tens of millions of dollars from foreign governments and foreign donors. Now y'all need to know out there, this is basic stuff. Foreign donors and certainly foreign governments cannot participate in the American political process. They cannot make financial contributions. But the Clintons figured out a way to create a foundation where foreign governments and foreign donors could donate millions of dollars. And then we found, thanks to the good work of the Associated Press, that more than half of her private meetings when she was Secretary of State were given to major donors of the Clinton Foundation. When you talk about all these baseless rumors about Russia and the rest, Hillary Clinton, you asked the trustworthy question at the very beginning. The reason the American people don't trust Hillary Clinton is because they are looking at the pay-to-play politics that she operated with the Clinton Foundation through a private server while she's Secretary of State. And they're saying enough is enough.
Senator Kaine.
I'm going to talk about the foundation, then I'll talk about North Korea. So, on the foundation. I am glad to talk about the foundation. The Clinton Foundation is one of the highest rated charities in the world. It provides AIDS drugs to about 11.5 million people. It helps Americans deal with opioid overdoses. It gets higher rankings for its charity than the American Red Cross does. The Clinton Foundation does an awful lot of good work. Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, took no action to benefit the foundation. The State Department did an investigation, and they concluded that everything Hillary Clinton did as Secretary of State was completely in the interests of the United States. So the foundation does good work, and Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State acted in the interest of the United States. But let's compare this now with the Trump Organization and the Trump Foundation. The Trump Organization is an octopus-like organization with tentacles all over the world whose conflict of interest could only be known if Donald Trump would release his tax returns. He's refused to do it. His sons have said that the organization has a lot of business dealings in Russia. And remember, the Trump Organization is not a nonprofit. It's putting money into Donald Trump's pockets and into the pockets of his children, whereas the Clinton Foundation is a nonprofit and no Clinton family member draws any salary.
The Trump Foundation is a nonprofit.
In addition, Donald Trump has a foundation. The foundation was just fined for illegally contributing foundation dollars to a political campaign of a Florida Attorney General. They made an illegal contribution, and then they tried to hide it by disguising it as somebody else. And the person they donated to was somebody whose office was charged with investigating Trump University. This is the difference between a foundation that does good work and a Secretary of State who acted in accord with American interests, and somebody who is conflicted in doing work around the world and won't share with the American public what he's doing and what those conflicts are.
Governor, I will give you 30 seconds to respond because I know you want to, but again, I would remind you both this was about North Korea.
Well, thank you. Thank you. The Trump Foundation is a private family foundation. They give virtually every cent in the Trump Foundation to charitable causes.
Political
less than 10 cents on the dollar in the Clinton Foundation has gone to charitable causes.
$20,000 portrait of Donald Trump?
Less than 10 cents on the dollar, the Clinton Foundation has gone to charitable causes.
90%.
It has been a platform for the Clintons to travel the world, to have staff. But honestly, Senator, we would know a lot more about it if Hillary Clinton would just turn over the 33,000 emails that she refused to turn over
Senator
that were
Kaine,
in her private server. We'd have a much better picture of what the Clinton Foundation was doing.
Senator Kaine, if you had intelligence that North Korea was about to launch a missile, a nuclear-armed missile capable of reaching the United States, would you take preemptive action?
Look, a president should take action to defend the United States against imminent threat. You have to. The president has to do that. Now, exactly what action? You would have to determine what your intelligence was, how certain you were of that intelligence, but you would have to take action. You asked the question about how do we deal with North Korea. I'm on the Foreign Relations Committee. We just did an extensive sanctions package against North Korea. And interestingly enough, Elaine, the UN followed and did virtually the same package. Often China will use their veto in the Security Council to veto a package like that. They're starting to get worried about North Korea too. Yeah. So they actually supported the sanctions package, even though many of the sanctions are against Chinese firms, Chinese financial institutions. So we're working together with China, and we need to. China is another one of those relationships where it's competitive, it's also challenging, and in times like North Korea, we have to be able to cooperate. Hillary understands that very well. She went once famously to China and stood up at a human rights meeting and looked him in the eye and said, women's rights are human rights. They didn't want her to say that, but she did. But she's also worked on a lot of diplomatic and important diplomatic deals with China, and that's what it's going to take. The thing I would worry a little bit about is that Donald Trump owes about $650 million to banks, including the Bank of China. I'm not sure he could stand up so tough to the people who have loaned him money.
All right, I'd like to turn to our next segment now. And in this, I'd like to focus on social issues. You have both been open about the role that faith has played in your lives. Can you discuss in detail a time when you struggled to balance your personal faith and a public policy position? Senator Kaine.
Yeah, that's an easy one for me, Elaine. It's an easy one. I'm really fortunate. I grew up in a wonderful household with great Irish Catholic parents. My mom and dad are sitting right here. I was educated by Jesuits at Rockhurst High School in Kansas City, my 40th reunions in 10 days. And I worked with Jesuit missionaries in Honduras now nearly 35 years ago, and they were the heroes of my life. I try to practice my religion in a very devout way and follow the teachings of my church in my own personal life. But I don't believe in this nation, a First Amendment nation, where we don't raise any religion over the other and we allow people to worship as they please, that the doctrines of any one religion should be mandated for everyone. For me, the hardest struggle in my faith life was the Catholic Church is against the death penalty, and so am I. But I was governor of a state, and the state law said that there was a death penalty for crimes if the jury determined them to be heinous. And so I had to grapple with that. When I was running for governor, I was attacked pretty strongly because of my position on the death penalty. But I looked the voters of Virginia in the eye and said, look, this is my religion. I'm not going to change my religious practice to get one vote, but I know how to take an oath and uphold the law. And if you elect me, I will uphold the law. And I was elected, and I did. It was very, very difficult to allow executions to go forward, but in circumstances where I didn't feel like there was a case for clemency, I told Virginia voters I would uphold the law, and I did. That was a real struggle, but I think it is really, really important that those of us who have deep faith lives don't feel like we could just substitute our own views for everybody else in society, regardless of their views.
Governor Pence.
Well, it's a wonderful question, and my Christian faith is at the very heart of who I am. I was also raised in a wonderful family of faith. It was church on Sunday morning and grace before dinner, but my Christian faith became real for me when I made a personal decision for Christ when I was a freshman in college. And I've tried to live that out, however imperfectly, every day of my life since. And with my wife at my side, we followed a calling into public service where we've tried to keep faith with the values that we cherish. And with regard to when I struggle, I appreciate and I have a great deal of respect for Senator Kaine's sincere faith. I truly do.
That's shared.
But for me, I would tell you that for me, the sanctity of life proceeds out of the belief that ancient principle that where God says, before you were formed in the womb, I knew you. And so from my first time in public life, I've sought to stand with great compassion for the sanctity of life. The state of Indiana has also sought to make sure that we expand alternatives in healthcare counseling for women, non-abortion alternatives. I'm also very pleased with the fact we're well on our way in Indiana to becoming the most pro-adoption state in America. I think if you're going to be pro-life, you should be pro-adoption. But what I can't understand is with Hillary Clinton and now Senator Kaine at her side is to support a practice like partial birth abortion. I mean, to hold to the view, and I know Senator Kaine, you hold pro-life views personally, but the very idea that a child that is almost born into the world could still have their life taken from them is just anathema to me. And I can't conscience about a party that supports that, or that I know you've historically opposed taxpayer funding of abortion, but Hillary Clinton wants to repeal the long-standing provision in the law where we said we wouldn't use taxpayer dollars to fund abortion. So for me, my faith informs my life. I try and spend a little time on my knees every day, but it all for me begins with cherishing the dignity, the worth, the value of every human life.
Elaine, this is a fundamental question, a fundamental question. Hillary and I are both people out of religious backgrounds. Her Methodist church experience was really formative for her as a public servant. But we really feel like you should live fully and with enthusiasm the commands of your faith. But it is not the role of the public servant to mandate that for everybody else. So let's talk about abortion and choice. Let's talk about that. We support Roe versus Wade. We support the constitutional right of American women to consult their own conscience, their own supportive partner, their own minister, but then make their own decision about pregnancy. That's something we trust American women to do that. And we don't think that women should be punished, as Donald Trump said they should, for making the decision to have an abortion. Governor Pence wants to repeal Roe versus Wade. He said he wants to put it on the ash heap of history. And we have some young people in the audience who weren't even born when Roe was decided. This is pretty important. Before Roe versus Wade, states could pass criminal laws to do just that, to punish women if they made the choice to terminate a pregnancy. I think you should live your moral values. But the last thing, the very last thing that government should do is have laws that would punish women who make reproductive choices. And that is the fundamental difference between a Clinton-Kaine ticket and a Trump-Pence ticket that wants to punish women who make that choice.
It's really not. Donald Trump and I would never support legislation that punished women who made the heartbreaking choice to end a pregnancy.
Then why did Donald Trump say that?
We just never would.
Why did he say that?
Well, look, he's not a polished politician like you and Hillary Clinton. And so,
well, I would admit that's not
come out exactly the way he means them, but I'm telling you what other policy of our administration would be.
Great line from the Gospel of Matthew. From the fullness of the heart, the mouth speaks.
Yeah.
When Donald Trump says women should be punished, or Mexicans are rapists and criminals, or John McCain's not a hero, he is showing you who he is.
Senator, you whipped out that Mexican thing again. Look.
Can you defend it?
There are criminal aliens in this country, Tim, who have come into this country illegally, who are perpetrating violence and taking American lives.
You want to use a big tar brush against Mexicans?
He also said, and many of them are good people. You keep leaving that out of your quote. And if you want me to go there, I'll go there. But there is a choice here, and it is a choice on life. I couldn't be more proud to be standing with Donald Trump, who's standing for the right to life. It's a principle that Senator Kaine, and I'm very gentle about this because I really do respect you, it's a principle that you embrace, and I've appreciated the fact that you've supported the Hyde Amendment, which bans the use of taxpayer funding for abortion in the past, but that's not Hillary Clinton's view. People need to understand we can come together as a nation, we can create a culture of life. More and more young people today are embracing life because we know we are we're better for it. We can, like Mother Teresa said at that famous National Prayer Breakfast.
This is important.
Let's welcome the children into our world. There are so many families around the country who can't have children. If we could improve adoption so that families that can't have children can adopt more readily.
Why
those children
don't you trust women to make this choice for themselves? We can encourage people to support life, of course we can, but why don't you trust women? Why doesn't Donald Trump trust women to make this choice for themselves? That's what we ought to be doing in public life, living our lives of faith or motivation with enthusiasm and excitement, convincing each other, dialoguing with each other about important moral issues of the day. But on fundamental issues of morality, we should let women make their own decisions.
A society can be judged by how it deals with its most vulnerable, the aged, the infirm, the disabled, and the unborn. I believe it with all my heart, and I couldn't be more proud to be standing with a pro-life candidate in Donald Trump.
I do have one final. It has been a divisive campaign. Senator Kaine, if your ticket wins, what specifically are you going to do to unify the country and reassure the people who voted against you?
That's a really important one. That may be the $64,000 question, because it has been a divisive campaign. And again, Hillary's running a campaign about stronger together. And Donald Trump, and this is not directed at this man, except to the extent that he can't defend Donald Trump. Donald Trump has run a campaign that's been about one insult after the next. But we do have to bring the country together. So here's what we'll do. Hillary Clinton was First Lady, then Senator for 8 years and Secretary of State. And I serve in the Senate. And I'm really amazed, Elaine, as I talk to Republican senators, how well they regard and respect Hillary Clinton. She was on the Armed Services Committee. She was on other committees. She worked across the aisle when she was First Lady to get the CHIP program passed so that 8 million low-income kids have health insurance in this country, including 150,000 in Indiana. She worked across the aisle after 9/11 to get health benefits for the first responders who bravely went into the towers and into the Pentagon. She worked to get benefits for TRICARE benefits for National Guard members, including Hoosiers and Virginians in the National Guard. She has a track record of working across the aisle to make things happen. And you know, Elaine, I have the same track record. I was a governor of Virginia with 2 Republican houses. And in the Senate, I have good working relationships across the aisle. Because, yeah, I think it's fine to be a Democrat or Republican or independent, but after Election Day, the goal is work together. And Hillary Clinton has a track record of accomplishment across the aisle that will enable her to do just that when we work with the new Congress in January.
Governor, how will you unify the country if you win?
Well, thank you, Elaine, and thanks for a great discussion.
Absolutely.
Tonight. Thank you, Senator. This is a very challenging time in the life of our nation. Weakened America's place in the world after the leadership of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama on the world stage has been followed by an economy that is truly struggling, stifled by an avalanche of more taxes, more regulation, Obamacare, the war on coal, and the kind of trade deals that have put American workers in the back seat. And I think the best way that we can bring people together is through change in Washington, D.C. You know, I served in Washington, D.C. for 12 years in the Congress of the United States. And I served with many Republicans and Democrats, men and women of goodwill. The potential is there to really change the direction of this country, but it's going to take leadership to do it. The American people want to see our nation standing tall on the world stage again. They want to see us supporting our military, rebuilding our military, commanding the respect of the world, and they want to see the American economy off to the races again. They want to see an American comeback. And Donald Trump's entire career has been about building. It's going through hardship just like a business person does and finding a way through smarts and ingenuity and resilience to fight forward. And when Donald Trump becomes president of the United States, we're going to have a stronger America. When you hear him say he wants to make America great again, when we do that, I truly do believe the American people are going to be standing taller. They're going to see that real change can happen after decades of just talking about it. And when that happens, the American people are going to stand tall.